Yes. Yolanda, are we ready? Okay. Oops, I heard something. All right. Okay. All right, thank you so much. I'm sorry we're starting a little later. It is Thursday, I'm sorry. Tuesday, out of habit. Thursday, October 6th. And we'll be starting our executive session. Can I get a roll call to establish quorum, please? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, general meeting.
Ms. Luna Rose?
Here.
Dr. Ravi? Here. Ms. Shaw?
Here.
Ms. Counts?
Here.
Ms. Grijalva?
Here. Thank you. So all 5 board members are here. We have the land acknowledgement. That's going to be written by Marley, or read by Marley. Is Marley with us?
Yes.
Okay. So Marley is an 8th grader at Gridley. And your camera's not on, but that's okay if you want to read the land acknowledgement and turn on your camera, or you just want to read it. Are you there, Marley?
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to go ahead and bring up the graphic that has the land acknowledgement. I don't see it. Do you have a copy of that, Marley?
Yes.
Okay, do you want to go ahead and start reading that then, please? Oh, there it is, right there.
Marley Taylor, Marley Taylor, Yaneshe, Kint Lachini, Nishle, Besh Pacha Dene, Bashashin, Hashkan Dene, Dashashe, Puerto Rican Dene, Da Shanale, Awat Ego, Dene Nashali. On behalf of the Governing Board of Tucson Unified School District, I, Marley Taylor, acknowledge that the schools, buildings, and faculties of Tucson Unified School District reside on the ancestral home of the Tohono O'odham Nation and faculty recognize tribal lands of the Pascua Yakua tribe.
Thank you so much, Marley.
Uh-huh.
We appreciate your time and apologize for the delay.
It's okay.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to have the Pledge of Allegiance read by Sadie Harbor. Sadie, are you there?
Yeah.
Hi, Sadie. Sadie is in 4th grade at Kelland Elementary School. And I have a little bio from your principal, I believe. Sadie is a wonderful student who's always positive and smiling. She loves school, especially reading and math. Sadie has a great time playing all kinds of games and being with her family and friends. And she is a delight to have at Kelland. So are you ready to read the pledge?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to, I think, put a graphic of the flag up. And then whenever you are ready, we're going to stand. You can start.
I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much for sharing some of your evening with us today, Sadie. I appreciate you reading the pledge.
Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy your fall break.
You.
Bye. Thank you. Okay. Dr. Through here, we're on agenda adjustments.
President Grijalva, members of the governing board, we have no recommended agenda adjustments this evening.
We do.
Or do we have any items where we have guests? We have our
I thought we had a, do we have a proclamation? 6.4? Yeah, can we move up 6.4?
6.4.
Because I
Yes.
believe and if we could do that, if we can do that right after your superintendent's report, before the call to the audience, we'd appreciate that. Does anyone have any objection to that? Okay, great. So if we can move up 6.4 right after your superintendent's report. Okay, great. Okay, and if there are no others, we're going to go ahead and move on to your superintendent's report. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, President Grijalva, members of the governing board. We begin tonight a note of sadness as we join our brothers and sisters and family members across the way at the University of Arizona as we join them in mourning in this tragic moment. Another unfortunate incident of gun violence has claimed the life of an outstanding educator, father, and husband in this community. So I'd like to ask all of you viewing online, all of you here in person, if we can observe a moment of silence for Professor Thomas Meixner, who lost his life yesterday while serving the students at the University of Arizona. Thank you. Members of the community, TUSD supporters, family members, students, and staff, welcome to our first October meeting. I want to wish the very, very happiest and most peaceful Yom Kippur to all the members of the Jewish community that are watching this evening. A couple of items for the update tonight. Just a quick word on COVID mitigation, a reminder that the current level of community spread in Pima County is low, and for all of our employees and our families watching, the new COVID-19 second booster shot is widely available, either the Pfizer version or the Moderna version, in places all around Pima County. COVID-19 pool testing is also widely available on a voluntary basis across the district at its schools and in our district office for our employees. And as a reminder to all of our coaches and sponsors, currently there are no restrictions on events, activities, athletic events, in-state, out-of-state, or international travel. As a reminder, masks are widely available across the district in schools for students, employees, and visitors to our campuses upon their request. Tonight, the community will get a view of the annual financial report. It is the marquee financial report, the state of finances in the Tucson Unified School District for the fiscal year. Tonight, proud to report some of the highlights. Our Tucson Unified School District has carried forward $24.7 million in maintenance and operation funding and has a carry forward balance and unrestricted capital for the books, the buses, and the buildings and the equipment of the district, the amount of $13 million. The district has been awarded just over $14 million in building renewal grant funds available for expenditure on projects approved by our state school facilities board. Those funds are targeted for roofing issues, chiller issues, HVAC issues, all major systems, electrical and plumbing, and we'll put those dollars to great use. Our carried forward balance tonight, some good news. We've been able to increase it by $700,000. The new Group B free and reduced lunch qualifying financial weight generated over $2 million in new funding for TUSD. That was the new free and reduced quote-unquote opportunity weight that was added to the per pupil funding formula. At 55.2%, instructional spending is projected to be at its highest level in the district since 2005. At 8.5%, spending on administration, the district's overall budget is projected to be at its lowest level in TUSD since tracking of spending for Arizona school districts began back in 2001. And congratulations to our district, our governing board, for spending over 75% of its overall budget inside the classroom. That is a wonderful achievement and worthy of applause. I want to thank all of our parents and all of our employees who joined me online, as well as our Director for School Safety, Mr. Joseph Hallams, our Chief Operations Officer, Mr. Blaine Young, and our Communications Director, Leslie Lenhart, for a very, very timely and important discussion and question and answer period on the state of campus safety and school safety here in the Tucson Unified School District. We will be adding some more forums in the coming weeks and even exploring the possibility of a live question and answer as we continue our planning. But this week, employees expressed concerns in some key areas. Number one, the need for more training and professional development across the schools so that our employees feel more confident, more trained, and more ready in the face of any emergency or crisis. Our employees noted the need for better access to keys and key cards, as far too many teachers communicated the feeling that they don't have access to the buildings, the classrooms, the offices, and the spaces that they need to either adequately secure their students or to do their jobs. And we heard of a need for more streamlined communication during emergencies and drills. We had a good conversation with our employees last night about the recent false reporting of a shooting at Tucson High and the disturbance and the disruption that that caused with the initial response and how we could do that better as a district administration and certainly communicate better with our employees. Our parents expressed concerns about the availability of weapons and firearms to students in the community. They also expressed concern about the increased presence of arms and of different types of weapons in schools, and a concern about the overall ability of law enforcement to respond in the timeliest of fashions in the event of an actual emergency. School safety was lauded for its recent performance in a couple of different incidents in which they've been able to respond significantly quicker than local law enforcement. And just a heads up for those of you in the community and those of you watching, the October 25th Governing Board meeting, our team will be presenting publicly to the Governing Board our proposal for a first phase safety and security infrastructure project package that will focus on upgrading and replacing areas in the district where we have dilapidated or disrepaired conditions with fencing, gating, doors, and then new video surveillance systems and keyless entry systems in areas around the district. This is just a first step. Capital funding and our financial situation is very, very limited in being able to take care of the needs of the entire district, but we're very excited to at least take this first step forward in terms of improving the overall safety and security infrastructure in our district. It's been a great September, so I want to thank a few folks. First of all, thank you to the middle school communities of McGee, Valencia, and Pister for some absolutely wonderful visits with employees and staff. Have vivid memories of all the wonderful people I met and just the amazing kids that came up and engaged me in conversations on topics ranging from everything from air conditioning on the bus to the quality of the food in the cafeteria to the quality of the food in the cafeteria again, and to the dress code, which of course we'll be talking about a little bit later on this month. Always great to hear from our students and again hearing from our employees and how thankful all of them are for the recent wage increases for a variety of classified positions, and of course the recruitment and retention stipends that are going to be paid out this semester. I want to thank Tucson Values Teachers for inviting me to participate in the panel discussion with business leaders at its annual Business Values Teachers event out at the Conquistador. Had an opportunity to serve on a panel to address business leaders across the community on the importance of supporting public schools and productive ways in which to partner with local public schools and school districts. Thank you to the Mexican American Student Services Department for inviting me a few Saturdays ago to address the parents at its annual Adelante Parent Empowerment College Knowing and Going workshop on the campus of the University of Arizona. Had an opportunity to meet some amazing parents there with their kids and their young people, taking the first step in making sure that those college dreams come true. And I want to thank our school community liaisons for hosting me and welcoming me there to their professional development session a few weeks ago out at Howenstein Professional Development. My message to them is they are one of the most important team members that we have to rebuild, repair, and strengthen the relationship between our schools and our families and our communities. And lastly this evening, the Tucson Unified School District, and specifically the Pueblo High School community, says goodbye to a legend. Coach Roland Levetter was a Tucson native. He was educated in Tucson Unified Schools, including Sam Hughes Elementary, Mansfeld Junior High, and Tucson High. He completed his BA and master's degrees at the University of Arizona before he returned to the Tucson Unified School District to teach social studies for 28 years at Catalina, Rincon, and Pueblo. Coach Levetter had a passion for sports. He coached boys and girls basketball teams at Rincon and Pueblo, leading his teams to winning seasons on multiple occasions. And though he enjoyed many years at Rincon University and many years teaching social studies throughout the district, 28 years, it was 1976, 77 season, 1977, 1978 seasons, where he led the Warriors to back-to-back state championships that will forever immortalize Coach Levetter in the history of Tucson Unified School District athletics as having coached one of the most legendary and historic basketball teams, not just in Pueblo history, but also in the history of Tucson Unified School District athletics. He will be forever linked to the images of cutting those nets down at the Activity Center in the spring of 1978, along with future NBA legend Fat Lever and TUSD employee Tony Mosley and several other of our Pueblo alumni. He will be missed. We are honored to have him leave his legacy in our district. We are honored that he chose Pueblo High School to make his greatest impact, inspiring students, athletes, and staff each and every day on the job. We will forever miss you, Coach. Our condolences go to the Levetter family. And to me, as a fan of sports and as an educator, it was my honor to be in attendance at the ceremony that dedicated the facilities out there at Pueblo High School to Coach Levetter, and of course the big mural that hangs in the gym in his honor. So we're going to miss Coach, and from our administration to the family and our community to the Levetter family, rest in peace, Coach. I'd like to observe a moment of silence for Coach Levetter. President Grijalva, members of the governing board, that concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo. We're going to go ahead and move to 6.4, and that is a proclamation of Digital Inclusion Week 2022 in Tucson Unified. And we have Matt Tabor-Walquist, who's Executive Director with Literacy Connects, here. Come on down. Did you want to read the proclamation? Would you like to, or do you want us to? And then we also have Cindy Hogan, Digital Inclusion Ambassador with Literacy Connects. And thank you so much for bringing this forward. Do we have a paper copy, or would it be easier for us to read it? Or can we blow that up at all? Because that seems very small. No? Yes? Let's see. What? I know. Are you trying to blow it up? Would it be easier for me to read? Maybe it would. Okay. Whatever works. Okay. Well, I want to thank you both for being here. And then, do you have a presentation, or did you want me to read the proclamation first? Do you have that? Maybe I'll read the proclamation, then we'll play the video. Does that work? Okay. So, proclamation. Whereas in the digital age, educational and health outcomes, economic mobility, and the overall strength of the democratic institutions are tied directly to the ability to get online, and whereas neighborhoods across the nation are experiencing a digital divide, and whereas the COVID-19 health crisis has shed light on the need for home internet service and on a large number of American households and all kinds of communities who do not have it. And whereas Digital Inclusion Week 2022 is sponsored by the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, representing more than 850 plus affiliated organizations in the 48 states, District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, working toward digital equity. And whereas Digital Inclusion Week 2022 aims to raise awareness of solutions addressing home internet access, personal devices, and technology training programs, now therefore be it resolved that the TUSD Governing Board declare October 3rd through October 7th as Digital Inclusion Week, and urge our TUSD community to celebrate the district's commitment to inclusivity and accessibility. And I read that in the form of a motion.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Item passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you so much. And then do you want us to play the video, and then maybe you say something? Okay, great.
short research paper done by tomorrow morning. Please make sure to include a works cited page. Oh, and it must be typed.
What am I gonna do? The essay's due tomorrow and I don't have a computer. I'm going crazy. Wait, I have an idea. I'll go to the library to type my essay. Close? I don't know what else I'm gonna do.
Or this.
You need to figure it out. Look, understand. I don't want any excuses. You know what? I quit. This job is never gonna understand.
Excuse me? May I please have a walk? Hello? May I please have a walk? Or this.
It's here, your new digital assistant, Geary.
Oh yes, Jerry is very nice.
No, Ma, Geary. This will make your life so much easier. All you need to do is say, go Geary, and it will do whatever you want.
But what
All right, bye, Ma. If you need anything, remember, just say, go Geary.
All right, go Geary. Please schedule a doctor's appointment for next Tuesday.
Now ordering ointment for next Tuesday. Go, Geary!
No, Geary. Please schedule a doctor's appointment.
Now ordering a pint of mints. Go, Geary!
Oh, this is so confusing and complicated. Son, this new Go Geary.
Go, Geary!
Quiet, you. This new thing is too complicated for me. I feel so lost.
Oh, Ma, what happened? I wish there was some way to help you understand technology.
Is there?
Well, let's talk about that. Digital equity is the idea that internet access and the technology necessary to connect should be treated as an absolute necessity. But often, these digital needs are only met by the more privileged, and those who have less are left behind. This is what we call the digital divide.
Many people around the world and in our own communities don't have access to everyday tech.
Others don't know how to use most modern devices and might even feel afraid of using tech in the internet.
And some just aren't able to afford all of the cost of having any devices.
But the solutions are clear and even more obvious than you would think. It's just a matter of doing.
We can establish technology how-to classes and hotlines and even petition the government to sponsor them, making technology education as accessible as possible.
We can raise awareness of the digital divide across the globe, making sure everyone understands what digital equity and inequity means.
We should treat internet and tech access as an absolute necessity and not a privilege.
Technology is what can help us connect together, especially when we can't communicate in person. Those without can feel isolated and cut off.
Technology is essential to much of creation and artistic expression. Those without tech miss out on many creative experiences and chances to explore new outlets.
Digital communication is essential to our everyday life when urgency is key. What would you do in an emergency without a phone?
Most career opportunities and information about our community is accessed via the internet and mobile tech. Someone who doesn't have access to either would be at an extreme disadvantage in their everyday life.
Many Pima County community members lack access to high-speed internet and the technology tools necessary for full participation in our society, democracy, and economy. This is a nationwide issue brought to the country's attention as a result of the pandemic. With gaps of internet access in rural and metro areas, cost of computers beyond reach of many families, and limited technology skills training available, we launched this strategic plan to bring solutions to the and underserved residents of Pima County. We hope you will join us in supporting this effort.
The world is changing quickly. Let's stop leaving people behind.
And help them catch up!
A message from your Wakefield Knights.
That was so great. That's the first time I'd seen that. And they sort of spliced it together, so I thought it was great. Yeah, did you want to make a comment or, Matt, and introduce yourself to everyone, please?
How about now? Great. Hello, everyone. I'm Matt Tarver-Walquist. I'm the Executive Director of Literacy Connects. Mr. Grijalva, I appreciate the star turn you took in the video. That was a real pleasure to partner with Wakefield Middle School on that. At Literacy Connects, we're a nonprofit here in Tucson. Our mission is to empower people to people of all ages to a world of opportunities through literacy and creative expression. And especially during the pandemic, when many of our services went online, we understood the acute need for digital inclusion, digital equity, and digital literacy, which is why we have a digital literacy ambassador, the amazing Miss Cindy Hogan, who I will introduce to you now.
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't send it to you. We were keeping it a secret until this is Digital Inclusion Week nationally, and we're all doing the people that work in this community of work are all doing a bunch of different things, and we decided we wanted to launch this video this week. So it's gotten a lot of play this week, and the kids did an amazing job. I think they spoke to everything that I would say, but I think they said it in their own words. We're thrilled that they had the opportunity to learn what's going on in their own community, and we're willing to put it into a video to share it with you. I put it on a national listserv today, and I'm starting to get comments back already from people, and I'm going to save them all and make sure that everybody knows that their work is going to be seen nationally. They'll be able to see whatever cities this is being seen in. So it's a win for all of us, and I'm really grateful to be here tonight to share that information with you. We really need to keep this topic top of mind so that we're starting to address the fact that people are being left behind if they're not participating online the way that most of us have become accustomed. So thank you so much for having us here tonight. Thank you for the proclamation.
Thank you, and our board members will sign it, and then we'll get a copy to you. Thank you so much, and thank you for being here. I appreciate it, and all your work with our students and for our community. Great. Okay, so now we're going to go back to the agenda, and it's call to the audience. Ms. Luna Rose.
Thank you, President Grijalva. Good evening, everyone, and happy fall break for those who are celebrating fall break, which I think is the majority of us here. So, okay, we've got call to the audience, and before I bring people up, I will read public participation at board meeting statement. Members of the public may speak during the call to the audience portion of the agenda. The governing board president shall be responsible for recognizing speakers and for maintaining proper order by setting such limitations as they may be appropriate. Those who want to speak in person or have their comments read may email or call the board office or may complete a request to address the board forum at any time before the close of the call to the audience. The speaker must state their full name and topic prior to addressing the board. Speakers are encouraged to be brief with a maximum time of 3 minutes. If there are documents for the board, please give them to the board office staff, and they will ensure each board member receives a copy. Those attending the meeting and/or speaking before the board shall observe rules of propriety, decorum, and good conduct. Speakers shall refrain from impertinent or slanderous remarks. And because TUSD serves students from preschool through high school, speakers should be aware that there may be children present. At the conclusion of the call of the audience, the governing board president will ask if individual board members wish to respond to those who have addressed the board, wish to ask staff to review a matter, or wish to ask that a matter be put forth on a future agenda. No more than 2 board members may address each topic. And our first in-person this evening is LaToya Phipps. Ms. Phipps? Okay. We will go on to Dolores de Vera.
Good evening. The last time I spoke, I asked the board to approve a retirement plan for subs because the system currently in place was never presented to the board for approval. The current system is unfair because it limits our ability to contribute no matter how many years we have worked for TUSD. Previous to 2015, you did not impose this limit on us. My colleagues have been asking me to take up this issue for a while, but I didn't up until this point because I really did not understand the pension formulas. So I asked my colleagues, who I thought knew more, to take the lead. The fact is, most employees don't want to walk up here and criticize administration or ask for something like this because they think it will put a target on their back and at risk for losing their job. Now I've tried harder to understand the pension formulas and I've crunched some numbers. I can see that these limitations imposed by TUSD have devastating consequences for the pensions of subs. I'm currently working with ASRS officials to format a comparison that they agree is accurate. But quite frankly, it makes me really sick that I didn't focus on this issue sooner. Yes, the 2020 rule is part of the law, but it doesn't say that you have to impose it on us every year or even 1 year, quite frankly. What it says is if we are engaged to work 20 hours per week for 20 weeks, we're members. It does not say you only become a member after you've worked 20 hours per week for 20 weeks. Another part of the law deals with jobs that are called limited appointments. If an employer believes a group of employees are going to be needed for less than 18 months, the employer can ask ASRS for permission to exclude those employees from ASRS membership, and then they don't pay in for 18 months. But if, in fact, those jobs continue into the 19th month, they do have to start paying in. I can see a third part of the law that deals with those hired to work in the state legislature when their jobs are expected to last less than 6 months. Those employees do not pay in for 6 months, but when they enter the 6th month, they must start paying in. And then they have the option to make retroactive payments for those first 6 months if they want. That certainly leads toward fairness. You were once told, or the board was once told, that TUSD subs pay in retroactively. It is not true. It wasn't true. It's shocking that Carla Soto did not know that but that's a statement she made when she was pitching outsourcing us. All of these laws say to employers, yes, you can exclude employees from active membership, but there are limits upon exclusion. Please support fair retirement for your substitute teachers.
Thank you. I'm sorry. ¿Hay alguien que necesita los servicios de un intérprete? I'm sorry. I forgot to mention it earlier. ¿Nadie? Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Melissa Conroy.
In a speech in June 2022, Dana Nessel, Michigan's AG, described the outrage over drag shows for children as fake issues. She said drag queens are fun. Drag queens are the ultimate symbol of disrespect for women. Men portray women as gross, ugly beings by dressing up in skimpy clothing with exaggerated features such as caked makeup, spiked heels. They make women look like whores, denigrate them, and portray sexuality as ugly and cheap. Unfortunately, not only have children been taken to some of these shows, but they have even participated in them where adults reward them with money. The rationale for exposing children to such disgusting behavior is an attempt to sexualize them. This is despicable and is not the least bit funny. Parents have every right to be outraged. The goal is to confuse the children sexually. Pedophilia is next. Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire wrote a column entitled, "Now the Left is Normalizing Pedophilia Right in Front of Our Eyes." Most recently, one of the drag queens at Drag Queen Story Hour performed a stripping dance for children. Tom O'Carroll is a British pro-pedophile advocate who was convicted and imprisoned for distribution of child porn and has had multiple sexual offenses against children. In his 1980 book, Pedophilia, The Radical Case, he argues that adult-child sexual relationships should be normalized and describes his own sexual experiences with children. O'Carroll says pedophilia is an orientation like gay or straight, and thus there are no moral grounds for preventing people like him from finding sexual fulfillment. He says there is sexual nature to these drag shows. This should put things into perspective for those still oblivious enough to think that drag queen story hours popping up at libraries across the country are just a bit of harmless fun. Hundreds of libraries have hosted events to bring children and cross-dressing men together. There is no practical reason why a man has to dress like a woman in order to read a book to children. The decision to add that element is to get children, especially boys, accustomed to the idea of cross-dressing. It is not hard to see where we go next. 10 years ago, there was no such thing as drag queen story hours or drag shows at school. Leftists would have called you a paranoid lunatic. Now it is commonplace. Yet they insist even Though grown men in dresses like to hang out with little children at libraries, there's nothing sexual about any of it. Soon they will admit it is sexual, but insist there's nothing wrong with a young boy and a grown man getting together as long as it is consensual. This is the threat to our children. Walsh is right. Pedophilia is being normalized right in front of us, and it is being celebrated by activists who believe that this is the step in the right direction. That is my problem with your drag shows. Stop having them.
Thank you. Next is Ginger Bichet.
Adelita, I hope you biked or walked to the school board meeting today, since it's bike or walk to school week. Seeing how you're on the health board now, you should be leading by example for the children you're encouraging to do so in our now dangerous city. I would also like to remind the board members, especially Adelita, the reason why we have these new laws, such as ending mask mandates and the pornography, is because of individuals like us. Parents like me and the parents with me begged our state lawmakers to make laws for the overreach of board members, like you and other boards throughout the state and our nation. We're sick of begging you at school board meetings, county meetings, city meetings for our lives back. All of you were overreaching. It needed to stop. This is the only way we could get it to stop. Your constituents spoke. They spoke through lawmakers. You stated on September 20th, overreaches of our state and where they don't allow the local Pima County Health Department to make decisions that are in the best interest of the community. You reluctantly voted to end mandate requirements for county workers only because you would be breaking the law. Your words, go ahead and follow the law. You literally want the state to stop telling you what you can and cannot do so you can tell us what we can and cannot do. You said the Pima County Health Department did a really good job of keeping our community safe. Let me tell you what you guys did. The mandates you voted for caused an enlarged heart for me, which led to other heart issues for me. That is you keeping the community safe. The county board had a physician that voted for this. The TUSD board also has a physician that voted for mandates. These are actual medical physicians that knew potential harm was possible and still voted to have some individuals just take one for the team and be injured possibly for life. I don't need daddy government telling me or my kids what to do. I'm the parent. You don't feed my kids. You don't pay my bills. You have zero say in my best interests and my child's best interests. I will never let you guys forget what you did. I know you get sick of hearing it. I was sick of living it, so I don't care. Not long ago, many parents came here opposing sexually explicit literature. You passed items anyway. Mr. Trujillo basically said, it's okay because it's only for certain classes, or it's only grades 10 through 12. I mean, I guess it's okay for minors to participate in sexually explicit material around grown adults, but it sounds fishy to me. I'm here to let you know the books passed are now against the law, another law we had to ask for. House Bill 2495 is now law that bans any textual, visual, auditory, classroom materials that include reference to sexual activity or conduct. The bill defines conduct broadly as any physical contact.
Ms. Bichet, your time is up. Thank you. Okay, next we have Stephanie Kirk.
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Kirk. I have a moral and ethic obligation to be here and to speak out. The V-Safe can be found on the CDC's webpage. It provides personalized and confidential health check-ins via text messages and web surveys, so the public can quickly and easily share with the CDC how they feel after getting the COVID-19 vaccine. The information helps the CDC monitor the safety of the COVID-19 vaccines in near real time. It took 463 days and 2 lawsuits before the civil rights attorney, Aaron Siri, received 144 lines of code that could have been provided in a matter of minutes from the CDC. So why did it take so long, and what were they hiding? Out of the data provided from 10 million users within the V-Safe, 7.7% had to seek medical care after the jab. Medical care is defined as hospitalization, while another 2.5 million had to miss work or school with a horrid jab reaction. We were told if you get the jab, it will prevent you from having it, it'll prevent transmission, it'll stop hospitalization, you won't die, and you certainly won't miss work. However, after evaluating the data, it has been concluded that 25% of people missed work out of 10 million people due to the adverse reaction. It was also concluded that 4 million people reported joint pain after the injection, which is an immune reaction and considered a prion disease, seen in medical studies that is been ignored by the board in exchange for the ESSER 3 ARP grant money. Out of this 4 million who suffered from the prion inflammatory disease, 2 million were moderate, not mild, and then 400,000 were severe. There were around 13,000 infants who were under 2 years of age who were registered within the VSafe. From that 13,000, there were about 33,000 symptoms experienced that were significant enough to report from the infants who were not capable of communicating. In the meantime, the FDA is preparing to publish a study on 4 potential adverse events following the Pfizer vaccines after withholding autopsy results on people who died after getting the jab. Perhaps you recall me asking why the FDA needed 75 years to complete a FOIA request on Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine. The FDA request to drag out the release of the information until 2076 has raised question about the efficacy and the safety of the COVID-19 drugs, or was it the continuous boosters needed which didn't stop breakthrough cases, and then Paxlovid, which offered the possibility of rebound cases? Seems like the cures cause more harm than good. As the new BA.4/5 booster rolls out, keep in mind that the old ones failed miserably, so why would this one be any different? The FDA is relying on the manufacturer's rodent studies, which shows—
Ms. Kirk, your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Lillian Fox.
I have no objections to masks and no objections to vaccinations. President Grijalva, members of the board, Superintendent Grijalva, and Mr. Ross isn't here tonight. Where the heck is Mr. Ross? Okay. You pay the superintendent quite a bit of money, and I don't object to what you pay him. It costs money to have a superintendent. This is a huge, huge district. But his salary is $220,000 a year. He has $20,000 to spend on various kinds of expenses that superintendents have. He gets $3,000 a year for memberships, and then he has a $15,000 performance bonus that the board decides how much of it he gets based on his performance, and I have no objection to that. However, when you look at the budget for his office, this guy that you're paying a $220,000 a year salary to gets $1,000 to buy books and periodicals. When you look at TUSD school libraries and how they're funded, they're getting less money this year than they have ever gotten. It's shocking how little money they're getting. You have 15 elementary schools that got $0 in this year's budget for books and periodicals for the library. Nothing, not a dime. You have another 12 elementary schools who only got $40 for the entire year for all their kids. When I haven't gone through the K-8 schools and the high schools and middle schools yet, but I've started working on them, and it looks like their funding is about as bad as it is for the high schools. If you're an educational institution and you want kids to learn how to read, you've got to provide something for them to read. When you look at our test scores on English language proficiency, we start off, a lot of our kids start off behind the typical kid when they start school because they're low income, and that's very typical of low income children. They frequently start off behind their peers who come from families with more money, where they've always had books at home because the family has money to spend on books. And when you look at our test scores, you can tell that our lower elementary school teachers work really hard to teach the kids to read. Their reading scores go up and then they go down because we're not funding our libraries. And if you want kids to improve their reading proficiency, they've got to have engaging books to read. And we don't provide them because we're not funding our libraries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Brianna Chilius.
Good evening to USD Governing Board members. Dr. Trujillo. It's no secret I am running for one of the candidates for the School Governing Board, so it's not a secret, it's not a surprise anymore. But I come to you as a former district employee, and I just want to happily acknowledge that recent news presented by the American Library Association as well as a division of the American Association for School Librarians that was in the works and is introduced, and I hope it gets passed, which is the Right to Read Act. And I'm so happy that Senator Jack Reed and U.S. Representative Raul Grijalva, your father, Ms. Grijalva, has introduced the Right to Read Act, which will do so much for our children in TUSD. It will address such disparities that exist in our district, ensuring that students have evidence-based reading instruction. Well-stocked libraries and fully staffed school libraries, family literacy programs, and a wide range of reading materials, as Ms. Fox articulately and eloquently presented to the board, and the freedom to choose what to read. It will also address the information digital literacy needs of today's students. So the bill goes on to further strengthen the effective school libraries by investing in recruiting and retaining state-certified school librarians and staff, and helping to broaden access to library collections. I would like to reiterate really quickly of what I mentioned in the July 26 School Governing Board meeting, which is the Supreme Court has ruled that the right of all children to read books free of viewpoint discrimination is guaranteed by the First Amendment. The right to read reaffirms that the First Amendment rights apply to school libraries in response to the alarming trend of book banning, and it protects school librarians and other educators involved in carrying out their duties to protect students' rights to read. Furthermore, restricting access to books will only chill free expression in our already richly diverse communities. It will discourage teachers and especially school librarians from introducing new ideas and expanding our children's minds' need for critical and analytical thinking and problem-solving skills. It will dissuade them from asking questions out of fear, addressing offensive and inappropriate topics, which is encouraged and needed for them to understand the reality of the world that we're living in. It will teach them fear and ignorance supersede the quest for knowledge. Reading is the safest way for our kids to learn about the world in which they are growing up, and doing so in a classroom setting, in libraries, guided discussions, and the discernment needed will only help them to anticipate and appreciate real-life problems. I'm so elated by this news, but why am I bringing this to your attention? The voters have heard me speak in forums. My point, I was a former library assistant, and I know how much this bill will be needed. So as a future governing board member, I will ensure that our schools and our students will get the equitable access, and teachers and the staff needed to have these access materials needed for their growth. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Jern Blanston. Mr. Blanston? Okay. And our next speaker is Margaret Cheney.
Good evening, board members, Dr. Trujillo. My name is Margaret Cheney. I'm the president of the Tucson Education Association. Tonight we come before you in the spirit of partnership. We are excited to be part of reimagining our district middle schools as we come out of the pandemic. We look forward to our continued partnership. We appreciate the Forum on School Safety yesterday and all efforts to keep our members and communities healthy and secure. When I first came to TUSD, I was a long-term sub at Palo Verde High School. I worked long hours, attended IEP meetings after contract time, created lessons and graded papers, met with parents, all without retirement benefits. Needless to say, I had not heard of TEA till the end of that year. For most Americans today, retirement is a privilege. You may have saved up enough money or paid off your mortgage so that you do not have to work as long or as hard anymore. The older we get, the more difficult it may become to do the work we have been doing. And so, if we can, we retire. This is why unions push so hard for defined retirement benefits plans so that people could grow older and live securely. For those without a defined retirement benefit plan, Social Security offers little in the way of security. Medicaid donut holes may send you spiraling into debt due to whims of pharmaceutical drug prices, and missing a mortgage or tax payment may leave you homeless and completely out of the system of care. We know that many of you have been having conversations with concerned substitutes, and we want you to know that in the spirit of collaboration, TEA is also having conversations with subs. We share their concerns and understand the need to recruit and retain substitutes. They are an integral part of our district and classroom, which is why TEA is eager to represent substitutes in our bargaining unit, and we hope to come to the table soon to create such a pathway. It is also our hope that you will consider the equity of retirement plans for our subs within our district. As we continue to stand up for our members, we are excited about the prospect of the many tasks ahead. As always, we thank you for all your time, patience, and consideration as we forge ahead into a better tomorrow. We also support libraries and librarians. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cheney.
Thank you.
Okay. That is the end of the call of the audience, President Grijalva.
Okay, thank you. Board members, any of you wish to respond? Okay, Dr. Ravi and then Ms. Shaw.
Thank you, President Grijalva, and thank you for all the advocacy for libraries and librarians from our speakers this evening. English language acquisition and literacy is on the agenda for the Budget Advisory Committee, so I'm going to do a quick plug for that. And related to this, because we'll be speaking about how we can best address literacy and English language acquisition in our schools, in elementary, middle school, and high school levels. We had our Part A discussion, I believe it was last week, and we have a Part B discussion on literacy coming up on October 27th at 4 p.m. So I encourage everyone interested in learning more about literacy and some ideas that our staff and our district and our Budget Advisory Committee will be addressing to make recommendations about literacy to attend that meeting. It will be live streamed as well.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Shaw.
Thank you, and thank you for everyone who spoke tonight. First off, as per the recommendations of Ms. De Vera, I would again like to ask staff to place on the future agenda a presentation on getting these subs into the retirement system. Second, I would like to thank Ms. Fox for her advocacy, and also Ms. Brianna Chilius for all of her advocacy in regarding to libraries, library books, and funding our libraries. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Okay. We're going to go ahead and move on to the consent agenda. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, as well, I want to thank all of our speakers. Thank you very much for coming out this evening. President Grijalva, members of the governing board, I'd like to present for your consideration the consent agenda as organized and presented, items 5.2, items 5.10.
Okay, thank you. I'll go ahead and move the item. Go ahead and second, and then she can pull an item off if she wants.
Okay, I'll second, but I'm curious what Ms.
Did you want to go ahead and pull an item off?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
We could pull item 5.6.
Okay.
That was the same one I was
Also
going
the
to.
minutes as well.
Okay, so what, 5.6 and 5.7?
Yeah, I don't have that.
Yes, okay, so we do 5.6 and 5.7. So I'll go ahead and modify my motion to exclude 5.6 and 5.7. Will you agree, Ms.
Yes.
Lynn Rose? Okay, great. So I have a motion and a second for the consent agenda. Minus 5.6 and 5.7. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes unanimously. Now we're on 5.6, Sabino High School Gym Floor Replacement Project. Ms. Shaw.
Thank you. So when overlooking this agenda item, one, I noticed that there's not really any justification for why we're replacing this. We're replacing the gym or redoing the floor. Also, in one of the attachments, the one labeled Executive Summary Attachment, PDF, it details basically redoing the HVAC at Gridley. And I'm just curious what's going on with this item. There's no justification. I would like to get a justification. It seems like it's an award, but like why is there an item in here talking about the HVAC being replaced at Gridley?
Dr. Trujillo?
Yeah, so talking about specifically item 5.6, it is through the school facilities board, so it's at no cost to the district. It's a building renewal grant. And that is for categories of expenditures on capital equipment and structural portions of facilities that are inoperable. So here to talk a little bit about the need for the replacement of the Sabino gym floor, I have our team here, and then for any questions on purchasing, I do have Diana Kierfoot, our purchasing officer. Is there another, if there's another question on Gridley, is Gridley on the agenda?
So the issue, Dr. Trujillo, is the executive summary that says it's about the Sabino floor is actually, the attachment talks about the HVAC system at Gridley.
Then that is our error there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just real quick before you go ahead, ma'am, is this floor at Sabino, is that the greatest need throughout our district?
Good evening, Board Member Shaw. I can tell you that if it was approved by SFOB, there was a clear demonstrated need, and those things are prioritized.
I think it's important to note that the School Facilities Board operates independently of TUSD. So we don't have any jurisdiction over the timeline or how fast they approve projects or whether or not they approve projects. If we give them 3 or 4 projects for them to agendize for their board's consideration, we don't control which one they might approve first, second, or third. There are some categories of project submissions that are generally regarded as being done very quickly. Catastrophic HVAC failures that take down an entire school, for example. Caved-in roofing, we had a situation several years ago at Carrillo where that was fast-tracked. But everything kind of in between, it is really difficult to get a read on how they do their priorities and which projects will go first, second, or third. Mm-hmm. So Mr. Young, if you want to add a little bit more.
Yeah, just that safety is always a consideration for something like a floor where students are running and playing in sport. So I'm sure that was a factor, that the floor was beyond repair and replacement. As Dr. Trujillo said, this could have been in the queue with SFOB for an extended amount of time, and we can provide the board more detail on all the factors that were included in that. But if it has been approved by the SFOB, then it was looked at and scrutinized by that organization.
Ms.
Thank you. Ms. Lindoros.
Yeah, Mr. Young, I'm just out of curiosity. My reasoning for the question is, I saw that there was only one bid out of like over 300 and some RFPs put out. So is that a regular occurrence? Is that normal? It seems kind of one.
Yeah, Board Member Rose, I'd need to check with our team on that in terms of what the capacity is in the area for doing floors like this. It may be that we just have limited contractors that are able to do it, but we can confirm.
Okay. I guess a follow-up question: if the board approves, is this like, would this be done right away? Can this come back? You know, I mean, what is the urgent? I mean, I understand the SFB, but like, if we waited another board meeting to get information, is that
Yeah, I think that would be absolutely fine in terms of at this point we have SFOB approval of this, just board approval here is what's required for us to move forward.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess my question is, these are grants specific for this project.
Correct.
So we're just approving this. We can't reallocate this funding to
That's
any
correct.
other project.
Yeah.
So I feel comfortable moving forward with this project only because there's a number of reasons why. I think you could send the information that Ms. Luna Rose is asking for after the fact, but it's not like it's going to change this project. This project is still, it's funding, this is all it can fund. Even if we have other items that are a higher, greater need in our opinion, if that's what they're going to fund, then it's a grant just for that, or
That's
amount of
correct.
money. Okay. I'll go ahead and move the item.
I'll second.
So I have a motion, a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes unanimously. Thank you. And then if you could just update the attachment online with the correct executive summary. Okay, thank you. Now we're on 5.7 minutes of TUSD Governing Board meeting September 20th, 2022. Ms. Shaw.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that the minutes are just very sparse, and I know everyone can go back and watch the video. But I think we can make the minutes a little bit more detailed. And I would also like staff to include, like at the end of the meeting, when we place items on the future agenda, what those items will be. Specifically, I'm always suggesting things to go on a future agenda, and I never see them on a future agenda. And just for posterity, we should, do that. And yes, please just, I have no issue with these minutes specifically. I just think as a whole, we need to make our minutes far more detailed. Thank you.
Okay. I do remember when they were very detailed, and then we were behind like 5 or 6 months. So this is pretty quick turnaround. And so maybe if you wanted to, if you had specific suggestions, maybe you could send those to Dr. Trujillo so it could be, so staff can understand what your request is and see if they can make those accommodations.
Thank you. I could be a little more detailed. Suggestion is like it says, oh, Sadie Shaw commented. Well, just give a summary of like I commented on like the DAPE situation at, Catalina. Just a very brief summary on what the comment was about. That's all.
Yeah, and I do appreciate the times are there also, which I agree, but the times are there too, so that's helpful because if we go back on the agenda and you're looking at the video minutes, then you can just like slide to that one if people have the capacity to do that. Okay. Do you want to go ahead and move the item?
I will move it.
Okay, I'll second. Any discussion, objections? Okay, item passes. Thanks. All right. Now we're on action item 6.1, TUSD fiscal year 21-22 annual financial report. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, here to present his inaugural annual financial report for the district, our new Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Ricky Hernandez.
Good evening, board members. This is my inaugural annual financial report, but I didn't write the budget for it, so let me just throw that caveat in there. So, with your permission, I'll get started. Next slide, please. Oh, too far. There you go. So these are just the 4 topics we're going to cover today. I'm going to talk to you just real briefly about budget versus actual expenditures, just so that you're aware of kind of what came in, what went out, what the status is of our carry forward dollars. Dr. Trujillo kind of already alluded to what you'll see. Just a review of fund balances, so you can see the different type of major funds and where we landed, and just an estimate of instructional spending, which again, Dr. Trujillo has already alluded to as well. Next slide. So these are our major fund types for the district. Overall, we have an operating budget, if you will, when you take the entire capacity of the district of nearly $800 million that you are stewarded by us. These are the actual expenses that you can see. On the far right column, you'll see the percent of budget. That is how much actually went out the door as it relates to the budget that was approved for those various line items. Now, a couple of caveats. For example, on the internal service fund, you'll see a negative, 101% is spent, and I'll go into detail as to why that took place Overall, we spent about 70% of the available funding that was approved by the budget or has been approved by various entities if there are federal or state grants, as well as other sources of funding that we have across the district. So we do very well at ensuring that we maximize the dollars that are available for our students and for our programs across the district. Next slide. This is specifically related to the Classroom Site Fund. If you recall, the legislature no longer requires us to separate it this way. We've continued to do it so that we can provide you a picture of how we fund base salary components, performance pay, and the other menus, such as the fine arts teachers that come out of Fund 13. Just an item of note for the performance pay, there's a $629,000 balance at the end of the fiscal year. In August, we paid a third payment of performance pay dollars to eligible staff. The average payment was about $59 because we needed to ensure that that the balance remained at $200,000. That is the agreement that we have with TEA, is to make sure that that balance never exceeds $200,000. So we discovered that we still had a few dollars to go, so everybody got about $60 in the first paycheck in August to make sure that we met with that commitment. Next slide. These specifically are grants. Obviously, the largest number is our federal grants related to COVID, ESSER, GEAR, ESG funds. We still had a $168 million balance available. Those dollars will continue to carry forward. You've been given plans, you've approved plans as to how we will continue to spend those dollars. There are various state grants. Results-based funding came in at a negative. Those are just delayed payments from the state. Those are funded by state funding, state grants that we get for results-based funding. But all in all, our federal and state awards are healthy. We continue to spend them exactly as approved. Next slide. These are some of our more major funds that are just considered other funds, a variety of them that you'll note. Infant and early learning centers, gifts and donations, our tax credit, our student activities funds, $44 million available still. These are for the most part cash basis, so we can only spend whatever cash is there. Gifts and donations has a negative, but they had a beginning balance of cash that is still available to them. So this didn't exceed, it's just that we actually implement a budget for that line item. There are expenses that have gone out, but those schools have not overspent their actual tax credit or their gifts and donations dollars. There is still cash available to spend that. So this isn't a cash balance, if you will. This is a fund balance, which is budget only. Next slide. And real briefly, internal service funds. Again, the Employee Benefits Trust ended up with a negative variance, but again, offset by a beginning cash balance. We will obviously never overspend our Employee Benefits Trust. We will make sure that we always have dollars in that fund, but these are just completely ins and outs from within the fiscal year. So next slide. So what does that mean for our carry forward balance? So this is something that Dr. Trujillo alluded to. So in fiscal year 23, we will be able to increase our carry forward that the district has already budgeted and the board approved by an additional $700,000. However, our capital side of our budget, we will actually have to have a decrease. We assumed that we would have a carry forward of over $22 million in unrestricted capital. That did not bear out. We actually spent beyond what we expected. We were still well within our budget of $37 million, but we ended up with a remaining budget balance of $13 million. So that is a $9 million difference. The downside to that is we will need to reduce the unrestricted capital budget at some point in fiscal year 23 by that $9 million. And we are working to identify to see where those $9 million will be recouped. This $9 million budget, this capital budget rather, includes DSEG. But the DSEG budget in capital is frozen. So whatever has been approved in the USP in the plan for capital expenditures related to DSEG will remain untouched. It's everything outside of the DSEG side of capital that we will need to figure out where we effectively eliminate $9 million. And I have, if the board wants to know, I do have more information about that, but I do want to make sure that you are aware that even though we have a $13 million budget balance carry forward, it is lower by $9 million than what we originally anticipated when we presented our budget to you in July. Next slide. So as you can see, this is the carry forward impact. Overall, the net loss when you combine both the M&O and unrestricted capital outlay budgets is $8.3 million. We are not going to be taking unrestricted capital from M&O. So I just want you to see kind of what the whole thing looks like together, but I don't want to interpret it as we are going to take $8 million from M&O because M&O has more money than capital. That's not the way it's going to work. Capital and M&O are obviously are independent funds. They do not cross each other. And next slide. So instructional spending, like Dr. Trujillo mentioned, instructional spending, we are currently estimating 55.2% of the dollars that we have in the district as being directly spent on instruction. This is the single highest number we've had in 17 years. Prop 301, if you recall, was passed in 2001. So the majority, this has been a long time coming, and this is, the great work that we do here in TUSD. Administrative spending is the lowest it's ever been. It is 8% ever since we started tracking in 2001. And classroom spending, just as as a refresher, that is instruction, student support, and instructional support that we provide to educate our students across TUSD. Over 3/4 of our dollars go into those three categories alone. So it's certainly something to be celebrated. It's certainly something that shows the hard work that we ensure that we do in the investments that we make of our dollars. And next slide. And questions, real brief.
Board members, questions? That's great to see the direction that we're going in with classroom and student spending.
I do want to make one comment that that is not in there, and it happened after I put this together. We did actually receive a recent rating change from Fitch, one of the major rating agencies.
Mm-hmm.
Their outlook for us has gone from stable to positive.
Okay.
So because of the direction that our financial picture is taking. So that in the long run does save the district dollars and definitely shows that we are committed to making sure that we have a strong financial picture for the future.
Thank you. Any questions? Ms. Shaw.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. Can we go back to slide 4 in this presentation? And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit, the performance pay here, slide 4.
One more.
I think one down,
yeah.
Is that the 301 money, performance
Yes.
pay? And that's the remainder? Or?
That is the remainder before the payout of the third payment in August.
And what was the third payment, 200,000? Or?
No, the third payment was basically $429,000. We can't have a balance greater than $200,000 in that fund. That is our commitment to TEA. So $429,000 basically divided by the number of qualified teachers came out to an average of about $60 per teacher. This is in addition to the June payment they've already gotten and the December payment they've already gotten in the last fiscal year.
Okay, I asked because I thought that 301 money wasn't supposed to be carried over.
301 money can be carried over. It's just that the performance pay bucket has a maximum threshold of $200,000. That is something that we've agreed to in this district with our teachers.
Okay, so the teachers decided it. Okay, let's go to. Let me find the slide. Slide 9. Is that it? Yeah. I'm, kind of shocked that there's not much about DSEG in this presentation. There is a little line right there about, 60 million plus that we've spent in fiscal year 23. Is that, I see that number is, a little bit lower than our typical DSEG budget of 64-ish million, right?
The DSEG budget is both DSEG M&O and DSEG capital. So when you put those two together, that's what we adopted We are allowed to spend up to $64.7 million approximately. But those dollars are spent 100%. That is the commitment in the USP, is to spend all the dollars to the maximum available in DSEG, which is the only element that I didn't specifically call out here, because the DSEG component as it relates to the AFR is rolled into M&O.
Okay, so we can't carry over DSEG, that I know.
Effectively, no.
And so where's the other $3 million?
Where's the other $3 million?
Like where, how
So
we
that
spend
was
it, how
part
we
of,
spend it?
my understanding is that that was part of a reallocation that the governing board approved for facilities. So those $3 million that aren't present here, this is adopted. Well, actually, this is fiscal year 23. Go ahead.
We do 2.7 million in DSEG capital.
Right.
So isn't it the rest of it over in the capital? Because our total's around 63 million.
Right.
And so you've got.
Yeah, it's about it's $63.6 million right there.
And we always have 2.7 million for DSEG capital
Right.
for like the magnet schools and all the DSEG
Correct.
facilities.
All the DSEG facilities pieces.
So
So
is that
that's
reflected in the budget?
exactly where we're supposed to be.
So shouldn't it be in the budget?
Shouldn't be what?
I just don't see it in the budget. Just wondering like why it's not, like why the full allocation of DSEG money, 910G funds.
So
isn't
Board Member Shaw,
present here.
if I may, down below where it says unrestricted capital outlay, you'll see the desegregation line. And that's the 2.7 million of our DSEG money that we're allowed to allocate towards facilities for DSEG programming. So when you put the 2.7 million together with what's up in our M&O line, 60.9 million, you have your balance.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question, if that's okay with the group. Thank you. So in the description of this, so if we pass this, it gets sent out, but like in your description, it says that there's also other reports, food service annual financial report, desegregation annual financial report, and a few others. Are we going to be able to see those, or have we seen them already, or when are we going to see them?
The only one that needs to be specifically approved by the board is this one. We have the other ones that can be provided, but all of those roll up into this. So the desegregation expenses, for example, would show you where we spent by salaries in instruction or supplies in student support or whatever. But those roll into that annual financial report. So those are supplemental reports that feed into that. I can certainly provide those. The AFR, the main AFR, is really the one that needs to be approved by the school board.
Okay, I would like to see those reports.
Okay.
Any other questions, board members? Okay, so this is an action item. So go ahead and move the item.
I'll second.
A motion to second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes unanimously.
Thank
you, Mr. Hernandez. Okay, now we're on 6.2, consideration of revision of school year 20, and I'm sorry, and a reminder to vote online, please. Consideration of revision of school year 2020-2021 superintendent goals. This is an item, I'll go ahead and ask that we take a pause and go into executive session, since this is an executive item that we didn't have an opportunity to discuss. We can do that now, or we can skip, go through the rest of the action items, and then do this item closer to the end of the meeting. What would we prefer?
President Guajalpa, I prefer to do the other action items first and then get to this at the end.
Okay, does anyone have an objection to that? Okay. All right, so we're going to move,
Dr. Trujillo.
Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, I was wondering if the board would entertain item 7.1. Our lobbyists are here, and I want to apologize. I thought they were virtual, but they are here. So I'd like to, if we're going to do the rest of the action items, go ahead and move them up.
Okay. Board members, any objection to that? We're going to move up 7.1 next. Okay, so we're 7.1 2022 legislative wrap-up and TUSD 2023 legislative agenda. Nice to see you. Come on up.
President Grijalva, members of the board, I'd like to welcome our outstanding lobbyists from Tri-Advocates, Mr. John Kelly, Lourdes Peña. They will be providing you with a play-by-play of the legislative highlights of this past legislative session, as well as entertaining a discussion for all of you to determine what your legislative priorities are, which act as direction for our lobbyists, as they engage in this important work at the Capitol. So with that, I'll turn it over to our team.
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo, President Grijalva, members of the board. It's very nice to see you in person. It's been 3 years since I think we've had the opportunity to be in front of you. So every other time we've participated or observed your governing board meeting, we've probably been wearing slippers and sweatpants, and we've got our slippers and sweatpants in the car for the ride home. So we've been privileged, the Travigates team that Lourdes and I represent here today have been privileged to represent Tucson Unified since January of 2015. So we're completing our 7th very interesting year. We've learned so much every year from what you do, and each year I think we get a deeper and better relationship with your superintendent, your executive team, and of course with you to understand how best to deliver your voice at the state capitol. What we want to do today, if we can move the slide forward a little bit, is we don't want to dwell too much about the 2020 legislative session. It certainly has its highs and lows, but it's also history, and we want to be more prospective about what's coming down the pike, and get your feedback, get your thoughts, and answer your questions. So what we're going to do is give a little bit of the recap, because there were some pretty interesting things that did happen that you're obviously dealing with, and your new CFO is dealing with, and we will be dealing with as well. Talk a little bit about the decision-making environment we're going to be facing in the next 3 months, although there are more questions than answers, I think, about that. And finally, talk a little bit about the political decision framework around K-12 issues and what we see coming there. So if we could slide just one more and then one more after that. So what we wanted to point out, again, this is all well-known public information, is that both the House and the Senate and the legislature are very closely divided politically, with one-vote majorities for Republicans in both the House and the Senate. This creates all kinds of interesting decision-making dynamics that we'll talk about a little bit more later in the presentation. So keep in your mind that blue and the red split and how close and even it is, and move to the next slide. And you'll see at the bottom of that slide the number of bills introduced, how many were introduced by Republicans, what percentage were introduced by Republicans, what percentage were introduced by Democrats, and then on the right of that slide, how many actually were enacted. You can see just that one vote majority really matters in terms of the success of legislative initiatives as they move through the process. That having been said, your delegation in Tucson is not part of the majority for the most part, but participates very actively in improving all those proposals as they go through the process. When we were first hired to represent Tucson Unified, one of the things we told you is that we believed that having us represent you would help you get a seat at the table. Now, we open the door, but you actually get to sit at the table. It's your voice, not our voice, it's your voice that's heard up there through your delegation, through your superintendent, and sometimes from you. And from your staff. So that is what your delegation, your Tucson legislative delegation does for you. They help us pass the word on, get your voice in front of it. The other part of that slide, which is about how many bills are introduced. The total number last session was almost 1,800 bills. It wasn't a record, but it was close. Definitely on the high side when you look back at different legislative sessions over the years. Of those introduced bills, about 9 or 10% of those, pretty much every session, are to amend Title 15, which is the education titles of the statute. Think about that. Of all the proposals, of all the time they're spending down there, 10% of it is about things that you have to worry about every day. So there is a very deep, important relationship between the work you do and the work the legislature does, and sometimes not always an easy one. So with that, what we thought we'd do is do a little bit more detail about what actually happened this past session, a little bit of the why, a little bit of the how, and I'm going to let my esteemed colleague Lourdes, who really was a warrior for the district down there this year, give you more details about that.
Good afternoon, President Grijalva, Superintendent Trujillo, and members of the board. Next slide, please. Well, thanks for having us. It is great to be in person. The drive was nice, and hopefully the drive back will be nicer because there was some rain on the way back here, but we do need the water. So we just wanted to talk about how can you really come and summarize 166 days of a legislative session in a very simple slide. And I think great resignation that I think everyone is experiencing. Employers across the nation, across the country are experiencing this. It was not, the legislature was not left untouched by that. We started January with about 11 brand new legislators, brand new in the middle of the session. We talked to you probably a year ago through Zoom, explaining that we expected that to be an all-time high. It was absolutely an all-time high. How that translated into the actual legislative activities was in a sense great, because you had new folks coming in midterm and had no baggage, no history, no tiredness, really. They were eager to come and do some work. And with that, the relationships were also, it took a shift where at times you'll see there was a lot of bipartisanship, clearly with the bipartisan budget they passed, but also a lot of divisiveness, because it was the first legislative session since COVID that everything was back to full normalcy, in a sense of full in person. All the committee meetings were in person. So that took a toll in just how the relationships with the colleagues at the state capitol were taking place. So, you know, all-time high for new folks to come in, resulted in an all-time historic bipartisan budget that was also impacted to some degree, those relationships and negotiations, by the upcoming election that is just, a month or so away. So obviously those had some issues, and that upcoming election took some attention away as well from the policymaking, because you're also getting into politics. So we also experienced redistricting, which meant every legislator is running in a new district, which also meant a lot of incumbents were put in the same district and running against each other. So that created some dynamics. Next slide. So the highlight, I think that obviously when John talked about all the bills that were passed, we provided a very detailed, thorough end-of-year report early on in the summer that can highlight all of the bills and policies that passed. But really the all-time high was the bipartisan budget that passed on June 24th, I believe it was, or 23rd. It's a blur memory now. But going back to every year, the budget is really negotiated until that last hour. Typically, that's what we hear, right? Oh, it's the last hour, they're working on it, they're making final detail adjustments. This year, it was 100% until the last minute. I think having all the legislators having a voice in the process, and obviously you had to deal with the executive as well, really meant that those changes were happening by the hour, by the minute. And we were very lucky to have Superintendent Trujillo jump on a call at 8 p.m. on a night before they voted at midnight with one of your legislators, because they wanted to know, hey, this is the deal that is being offered. How is this going to impact Tucson Unified, and what do you think? We provided information. This is the budget. Could it have been better? Absolutely. Everything in this budget could have been better, but everything could have also been worse. So this was the deal that, the art of the possible, right? The priorities for the state legislature were water infrastructure, education funding, public infrastructure, and public safety. So those are just high-level buckets to think about as to how they dedicated those dollars. Next slide. So K-12 spending, top priority, top of mind. I think one of the things that the district has worked in the past and always wanted to support was more funding for special education. This was the year the bipartisan budget delivered $100 million in sped ed funding. It was also the year that you heard earlier, that new Group B weight that generated $2 million for this district, but that is also known the new opportunity weight, which was $50 million for the state. Statewide for the first year is supposed to increase over time. Again, the need it's definitely higher, but it was a great start to negotiate this and to put that into the formula. Another piece that there was a lot of consternation and a lot of discussion was the elimination of the state equalization tax rate. That's the way that it's in the budget. It would show us additional $330 million from the state spending to local school districts. The reason for that is because that funding was before coming from local property taxpayers. Now it's shifted to the state general fund. In a net, it's not new money to schools, but it is a shift that the legislature has decided to take on at the state level rather than your local property taxpayers. So this is something that we need to look into how the implementation is going to be in the next few years, because it could create a challenge just if you have a recession, what happens with future funding. But overall, I also want to talk about the increase in base support level. That was significant, and that increase was an outcome of ongoing conversations with key legislators about the need for extra dollars, given everything that the schools are facing across the state.
Next slide, please. We put in the back of the presentation our sort of curated list of the major education proposals, certainly not comprehensive list. As I said, probably 150 to 180 bills were introduced for Title 15, but we put in what we thought were the most important, some which passed and several that did not. But this slide basically lays out what has been true for years and will likely be true for the years to come, is the kind of proposals we're going to be facing next year, whether proactively or defensively. The mandate issue, things that tell you to do something different than you would otherwise do. It may have to do with application of medicine for students, or it may give you a new procedure for parental consent on different activities. There are a lot of those kinds of bills this year. School choice is certainly a policy issue, major issue this year with the Empowerment Scholarship expansion of eligibility. There's always a lot of legislation relating to school finance and operations. Some of that is generated from the school side of the house, where they need clarification on a school finance definition, or because of the decision to do a Group B weight enhancement or the new opportunity weight. And then there's always interest in instruction and curriculum, the K-3 reading programs and sometimes it's vendors that are pushing those kinds of things. And finally, the A through F accountability system, the assessment system, how that all works, how schools are performing, how they can perform better, what can be done to better support teaching or administration. Those are the 5 general categories of things. So as you think about things that you care about, things that you want to see the legislature enable or prohibit, these are generally the categories that we think about.
Next slide. So as we look ahead, again, we didn't want to spend too much time on what already happened, but as we look ahead, there's going to be recurring themes again. And it's not always, brand new ideas that come. We always say it's the same process. Sometimes it's recycled ideas that come back in a new form. But we definitely expect one thing that did not happen, and it was a missed opportunity, was to address the aggregate expenditure limit as part of the bipartisan budget. So it was fantastic that there was a lot of additional funds appropriated to the school districts, but it lacked that authority that we need due to a constitutional cap that school districts have, which is known as the aggregate expenditure limit. That was not addressed. As we speak, there's ongoing efforts right now. We participate in ongoing efforts to call for a special session to address and provide a fix for the AEL before the end of this year. Why before the end of this year? Because it would theoretically make perfect sense that the legislators that voted for the increase in funding can have the opportunity to vote for the authority for school districts to go ahead and use those dollars. Now, whether that's going to happen before the end of this year or not, we don't know yet, but we're working on it. If it's not, that's for sure a top of mind for January, for when we start session again. But just to put in perspective, the overall limit is projected that across the state we are about 1.3 billion over the limit. So that's all the school districts. So it would be important for that issue to be addressed. People seem to be very sympathetic to that, and we'll see where the end of that storyline is. But universal ESA expansion implementation, I think we just wanted to share, it's been a lot of back and forth with when House Bill 2853 passed, whether or not that was going to be implemented. There was an effort by folks led by Save Our Schools to refer this to the ballot and postpone the implementation of the Universal Empowerment Scholarship Accounts program. That effort was not successful. Therefore, as of today, the law of the land is the universal ESA expansion that was already declared by the Secretary of State's office, who shared that not enough signatures were submitted to slow or to refer this to voters in 2024. Therefore, the Department of Education is actively working on administering the program with this new expansion. The FYI, the applications for that program are year-round. And typically, it's every quarter. There's a deadline for this first quarter because of the delay with whether or not this was approved or not. The Department of Ed expanded the deadline for parents and families to apply for the universal program to October 15. And as of this morning, the total applications for ESAs, all ESAs, not only universal classification, is 23,502. Out of that, about 22,500 are specific under the category of universal ESAs, and roughly just to share that, 10,000 more than what last week. So just to show the demand that, or the folks are applying, 80 estimates that 80% of the applicants show no record of attending a public school in the past. So something to keep in mind, how that's going to be implemented, whether there's any need for trailer legislation to modify or clean up the bill that passed this session.
The next issue that occurred last year, and we anticipate it coming back, I think it was March 29th, maybe several days before a hearing on a bill on a completely unrelated matter. We got word that there was going to be an amendment run to fundamentally restructure school finance for the entire K-12 system in what's called a strike everything amendment. So very little notice, no stakeholder participation, and the last time the school finance system that Arizona operates with in general terms was originated in 1980. It's been tweaked since then, but generally what we have today is similar to what we had 42 years ago. So there is a substantial interest, but not agreement as to what school finance reform should look like. But the advocates for this particular proposal, including the Arizona Tax Research Association, were proposing what they called more student-centered funding, and to eliminate the kinds of what they would describe as fiscal inequities that make some schools have more funding available to them than others, which could include M&O overrides, could include bonds, and could include 15910G DSEG funding as well. So those are the kinds of issues that are going to come back again, whether that relates to the AEL, whether that's going to be linked in some way, shape, or form, we don't know. But the other thing that the legislature is going to have to confront is with the expansion of charter schools, which are general fund supported, as opposed to general and local like traditional school districts, with the expansion of ESAs, which are general fund supported, and with the elimination of the equalization property tax, the legislature is intentionally putting more of the burden of K-12 funding on that one fund, the general fund. So right now, the general fund is in very healthy shape, has lots of money to go around. There are predictions of clouds on the horizon with a recession. We know we've been through general fund reductions in the past. So there is enormous risk on the horizon, I think, when the legislature makes policy decisions to put all their eggs, figuratively, in that one basket. Right now, it's not an issue, so it's hard to get anybody excited about it, but it's something we wanted you, in your leadership role, to keep in mind. The other element is, as we mentioned, there's so many proposals that talk about what schools can and cannot do, prohibitions and allowances. That's why Title 15 gets thicker and thicker and thicker if you actually still read it as a book. And so there is discussion, frankly, on the part of both traditional school districts and now even charter schools, because charter schools are not immune to this as well, to look at those things and see if we really want to promote educational excellence, educational innovation, choice is one thing, but getting rid of unnecessary rules and restrictions that prevent your education leaders from actually implementing programs and projects. If there are things that you all want to see, then that's going to be on the table as well, because there is a certain element at the legislature, bipartisan, that understands that just passing bills to increase Title 15 restrictions is not going to improve education, and people do want to make your jobs easier and not harder. The last point I'll make is about concerns about the A through F accountability system. We've got a new assessment because of COVID. We haven't really implemented letter grades for several years, so it's going to be a little bit, again, a shock to the system as to how that plays out. We've had one gubernatorial candidate talk about maybe eliminating the A through F system, the statewide accountability system. Certainly the ESAs don't have any accountability attached to them, so I think accountability will be a lively topic at the legislature next year, as it often is.
Teacher retention and recruitment issues continue to be a top of mind for the legislature, and we expect that to continue. I think that the concern, it's not only teacher retention, but really just workforce in general for school districts, charter schools, the education system in general. So we foresee more conversations as to how can we provide innovative ways to retain and recruit folks into the job. Part of it is even going into the housing spectrum, because there's some discussions as to how can school districts utilize some of their facilities for teacher-gist, they call them, where you can provide housing for teachers. So more to come on that, but we do expect that to continue to be top of mind. Career and technical education, the district has done incredible work on this for CTE. You guys have really showed a commitment to expand that. And generally speaking, that's one of those issues education-wise that is absolutely nonpartisan. Folks seem to really appreciate and want to invest more in that. We do have both candidates, I would think would be, for the governor race, would be supportive of CTE expansion in some degree, but one of the candidates has been more vocal about her ideas as to how she would want to do more of a dual path or track for students. But overall, with workforce issues that we see, with the business community demanding for more people to be ready and hands-on training, and really the success that we have seen with CTE and academics and how they correlate together, it seems to be like a top priority for folks to focus on again. So we'll keep you posted on that. Next slide.
And this is just a little bit more about the current moment. Next slide, please. Nothing that I think is terribly newsworthy for you. Obviously, Arizona is one of the key benchmark states for where our national and state politics are going to go. The differences between the candidates couldn't be more stark in a lot of places. We also have a lot at stake right now. Every single legislative office is up for election. Every single statewide constitutional office is up for election. There is going to be massive turnover in who is going to be leading us. The turnout for the primary election was 35%, which obviously seems like not enough, but it's also way higher than normal. We anticipate that the turnout for the general election will also be higher than normal, but please remember, midterm elections tend to have about 20% lower turnout than you'd see in a presidential election year. But for Arizona, it's obviously a very consequential election with very competitive races in pretty much every part of the ballot, including school boards. The primary election voters did a lot of, were heard. They were heard. And we have a lot of legislators that were cruising along that thought they were coming back next year, and they are now in or looking for new jobs. And not necessarily unhappy about it, but that's the nature of the beast. Right now, we're looking at perhaps as many as at least 41% of those 90 legislators will be brand new to the system. So all the relationships and all the work that we've done to help get them to understand the unique challenges facing Tucson Unified and Pima County, it starts all over again. We starts all over again. But we've got a good story to tell, and we've gotten better at telling it. And like I said, the teamwork that we enjoy with your folks is very important. But we want to make sure that you know who you're going to be potentially dealing with, who are the candidates. Obviously, you get to see the street signs like we do. But we can talk a little bit more about the who in Pima County.
Next slide. So this is, we wanted to do regional. Obviously, the district, we really want to do a regional window to you all because we wanted to share who are the candidates that are running to represent the areas of the state. You know, not everyone is going to have a portion of Tucson Unified within their district, but we'd like to say you are the largest school district in Southern Arizona. Therefore, everyone that represents Southern Arizona should have an added value to your work as well. So we want to interact with all these folks. Just to put it in numbers, obviously I think you'll see some names here that we're very familiar with, we've worked with for years, great champions for the district. There's other new names that at least are new to us in Phoenix, but maybe they're not new to you, and that's where we love to collaborate with you, with your staff, to figure out, okay, after November 8, and we know for sure who's going to be representing this region, we really work and develop those relationships and provide those tools to our legislators for them to really tell your story, like John was saying. But just in numbers, based on the candidates, and of course there's some writing candidates as well that we included because we wanted to be inclusive of everything. But just based on those numbers, here you would have a total of 18 legislators, right, representing the region. About 11 of those folks are returning members. So for this area, you know, the majority of the members do have some legislative experience, some much more than others, but that's something to think about for institutional knowledge. There is some retainment there. We like to plan and meet with the legislators before session right after the November 8 election, so we'll be meeting with them and really sharing what your priorities are, but also hearing from them as to what their priorities will be for the area, and then coordinate and find those common goals so we can coordinate through the next session. Next slide. So again, the general election, it has impacts on what's going to happen next session. There's no doubt about it. October 11th, next Tuesday, is the last day for folks to register to vote. Voting starts as early as Tuesday, and then November 8th, we have the election. We hope to know the results of that election by January 9th. But, you know, most people won't want to forecast. I can definitely tell you that my forecast is we will have our governor, and I think the person will be a woman with a first name starting with letter K. So there's no doubt about that. We for sure know that much. But we also know for sure that January 9th is when session comes back, and that's when the official, I say official because the work really is year-round, the official work will begin on January 9th. And I think with that, you know, we're open for questions. There's appendix, materials on the appendix. We're happy to get into the weeds of any of that, but want to be respectful of your time.
Well, I appreciate your presentation and your slides. I think they were really clear and easy for anyone who wants to see what this agenda item was about, just to click and open it. So I appreciate that. Board members, questions? Okay, I think it seems like you are very thorough, and we look forward to who's going to be representing us at the state, and I also appreciate you kind of laying out timelines that we have, you know, if you're not registered, that kind of thing. Dr. Trujillo?
Yeah, I know. I want to thank John.
Oh, your mic's not on.
Thank you, President Grijalva. I want to thank John and Lourdes, and just for the community watching, I don't want to understate the severity of what an aggregate expenditure limit cut would mean to the Tucson Unified School District. It would be upwards of $60 million that would have to be carved out of our budget. That's 60. The Tucson Unified School District also receives just shy of $12.5 million through state equalization funding that has always been provided to the district, which now, at least for 1 year, was funded out of the general fund. We don't know what the future is there. We don't know if that expenditure is going to continue to be funded. So it's a pretty serious landscape financially that we're going to hang on, and we're going to be counting on your best efforts to tell our story. I think if there's one area where we can play offense, because it seems like it's the majority defense. Bill comes up, we have to call, we have to play defense, whether it's attacking desegregation funding or underutilized facilities or school takeover bills. But if there is room for offense, increased flexibility for alternative instructional models, that's been a bright spot in the last few years. The increased flexibility and autonomy that we've had to create things like TUVA and to be able and not to have to take such a massive hit on per pupil funding because our students are electing TUVA. I think the future is more hybrid models of instruction, part-time in the building, part-time online, project-based learning. So I mean, I think if there's an opportunity to play offense, it's there with our legislators. And I know they typically have been very rigid with instructional minute requirements and bell time requirements. And if we have a new crop of legislators, that may mean a new opportunity for innovation, especially if the essential question is what barriers and regulations are really holding schools back in terms of innovating. That would be one, the instructional minutes. Definitely a barrier. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you. It was nice to see you in person.
Nice.
Thank you. And thank you for all your work for TUSD. Okay. So now,
6.5.
and so we're going to skip 6.2, 6.3. We did 6.4, so now we're at 6.5. So 6.2 and 6.3 for those listening online have to do with the superintendent, and that was one of the items in executive session that we didn't get a chance to touch on, and so we're going to skip those so we can come back to that. 6.5, Budget Advisory Committee, BAC membership recommendation. Is that Dr. Trujillo? Dr. Ravi?
I will turn this one over to the board's representative on the back, Dr. Shaw.
Thank you, Superintendent Trujillo, and thank you, President Grijalva, and fellow members of my governing board here. We have two nominations for the Budget Advisory Committee this evening. I'm really excited I think we'll get to a full contingent if both of these nominations are approved tonight. Our first on the docket today is someone who's well known to our district, Dr. Alberto Siqueiros, who owns 2 doctorates in educational leadership and administration, and he is representing our tribal communities, having worked directly for and with Native communities, including as superintendent of the Baboquivari School Unified.
Baboquivari.
Thank you, Unified School District. He's had many leadership roles in TUSD over the years, including Chief Academic Officer and Assistant Superintendent for Student Services. He was a principal and teacher in TUSD along with other regional districts. So we have before us Dr. Siqueiros for a nomination for the Budget Advisory Committee.
I just saw him. He didn't mention he was doing this. I'll go ahead and move the item.
I'll second.
Let's have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Item passes unanimously. And thank you, Dr. Siqueiros. And then 6.6 is then another Budget Advisory Committee BAC membership recommendation.
Yes, our second recommendation is actually a math teacher coming before us, Taylor Pacheco, who reached out to me directly after my call for members for the Budget Advisory Committee, so it worked. So thank you for all of you listening in streaming land for paying attention late into the meetings and stepping up when a call is made out there for help and getting your perspective on our committees. Taylor Pacheco is a math teacher at Pueblo High School. And she has a master's in education in secondary mathematics and a BA in mathematics. She's going to add some really important number crunching prowess and keep us effective when looking at data and statistics, I hope, when she, if approved, to join our Budget Advisory Committee tonight.
Thank you. I'll move the item.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Item passes unanimously.
So can I say a big thank you for Dr. Siqueiros and for our amazing math teacher, Ms. Pacheco, for joining us and for stepping up and taking your time and volunteering to be part of this important service for our community. So thank you very much for stepping up.
Thank you. All right. Now we're on 6.7. And that is Governing Board Policy KI, Visitors to School. This is a revision and a second reading. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, we have a second read tonight. Here to take us through it is our Associate General Counsel, working the meeting tonight in relief of Mr. Ross. Mr. Aronoff.
Thank you. So this is the first of two second reads we have tonight based on new legislation. This is a change to policy KI, visitors to schools. The update is a requirement in the new legislation that we add to our policy some standards for basically allowing parents to visit and as long as it doesn't threaten the health and safety of TUSD pupils and staff. This, as I said, is a second read. This was posted for comment. The comment period closed a couple weeks ago. We did get several comments that were attached to the agenda item. I guess I just want to address, if I can, the thrust of several of the comments seems to be that there's concern that parents might just be able to sort of walk in whenever they want and sort of impose themselves on the classroom and be intrusive without any sort of warning. And I do want to make clear that we had language already in the policy that requires prior school authorization. That language hasn't changed. This policy will still require prior authorization from the school. It just changes effectively the standard that the school needs to apply when authorizing these visits. And then lastly, and not related to the public comments, but there is one last sentence in that first paragraph that was added by the board or pursuant to the board discussion related to not taking photographs or video recordings during that visit. Just to clarify, that's not part of the legislation, but we did add that for clarity.
Thank you. I think that was a concern that, people walking through, recording, capturing images of other children, not okay. So, board members, any questions about this item? Any concerns? Ms. Shaw.
Thank you. Just reading some of the policies or the comments that are attached to this, and I don't see some reference to any of these comments. Specifically, Ms. Kist points out that the policy doesn't require visitors to sign in, and I know that depending on each school site, they might have a different policy. But I didn't see it anywhere in this policy where it explicitly states that visitors must sign in at the office first.
Sure enough.
It may not be explicit in the policy, but I think all of our schools, I guess I can't promise off the top of my head, but every school that I've been to has a sign-in, and those practices, even if not specified in this policy, are still part of the practice that schools would apply when parents or anybody else is coming as an authorized visitor. So that piece wouldn't change, and the fact that it's not specifically written in the policy doesn't mean that we're not doing it as a protective measure.
Dr. Trujillo?
Yeah, I can confidently communicate that is an expectation at each and every single school. There is a required sign-in process. There needs to be a record of the process with a signature. We require that the front office check the ID of the person coming in that wants access to students. There's one area of the school that visitors are allowed to arrive at. That is the front office or the lobby area until they are verified with their ID. The most common reason for visits in the elementary world is to eat lunch with students. Our schools have wonderful procedures. I was just recently at Blenman. Same procedure applied. Parent comes in. Parent is identified on the keyless access system on the video monitor, buzzed in, ID checked, sticker and badge given. Then the parent can go into the cafeteria and eat with their student. If the parents are there for a specific meeting with teachers or with administrators or IEP meetings, those meetings are scheduled. Parents are expected to report to the front office until our staff is ready for the meeting, in which case they arrive in the front office and they escort the guest back to the office or classroom where the meeting is. Been visiting a lot of schools, and that's literally the first thing that I look at in terms of when we walk through the door. So I'm very confident in our schools and what they're doing right now. I think our biggest challenges are going to be later on down the road are going to be staffing. As we put more and more responsibility on our front office staff to tend to the security needs of those arriving on the campus, we still have the needs of serving our employees and our classroom teachers who may be calling the front office, emailing the front office, needing things from the front office. So as we continue to put those responsibilities on our front office teams, we may have to look at that a little bit more in the future in terms of workload.
I'm sorry.
Yes,
Could I just
Mr.
add
Enoff.
one? To follow up and in response to specifically what's in the policy currently, there is in that second paragraph language about all visitors to the schools shall report to the school office when entering and must receive authorization before visiting other parts of the campus. And so that, even though it doesn't say sign in, specifically, that's that procedure to make sure that everybody walking in to the campus is being seen in the office first, checked out, given whatever process needs to happen before they move on to the rest of the school.
Okay, I'm just not sure if it's actually happening across the district. And maybe perhaps, Dr. Trujillo, you're more visible than some other people. And so, you're buzzed in pretty quickly, but I know just from visiting schools, like I don't always have to sign in. And even when I'm buzzed in, like there's no question. Typically there's like, I don't have to state my name or anything like that. And I think we should probably explicitly state that. So just across the board, everybody's doing it. And I believe the Ms. Kist, in her comment, she rationalized it that to have someone always sign in, it could help the school track their community engagement, and perhaps they could use that in a grant or something like that. But if it's not explicitly stated in the policy, although we may expect our office staff to do that, I just want it to be clearer.
Mr. Enoff, Dr. Trujillo.
Say that there are times with our staff where I have to remind them to tell me to sign in. When they see board members and they see cabinet members, sometimes our employees are a little nervous to say, you need to sign in, or you need to. So there's just that element as well. I've had that happen to me, where I'll walk over to the clipboard and sign in or put the sticker on or do whatever. So I think there's that element, but we certainly will always remind our principals that sign-in and check-in procedures, first and foremost, are literally the most important procedure that we have for the guests, the visitors, and the parents.
And if the board wants to add that language to the policy, it's the board policies. You could move to amend it to add language about signing in to that sentence.
Okay, I would like to move to add language in reference to signing in.
Okay, can you move the entire item and then just add that language, and then I'll second.
Okay, I have a couple more comments.
Okay, go ahead.
If I may, Miss Barajas, she commented that she would like the term disruption defined in the policy, because what is a disruption? Is it just taking up too much time? Is it asking a teacher-appointed questions? And just so the visitors don't come in with an explicit agenda, perhaps we can define disruptions so that we're not going to violate our own policy when we ask someone to leave because they are doing some disruption that might be minor, but also major in some ways.
Yeah, Ms. Counts.
I like keeping it open and not have such strict definitions with it, because it empowers our schools and doesn't limit the policy and limit what disruption is or is not. So it keeps us out of a potential liability where somebody will say, well, I wasn't doing what this said in your policy as disruption, and so then they could come back and get us, where if we keep it open, then we define those terms, and I think it's just reasonable definition of what disruption is.
And it could go both ways, where a disruption is, someone might be bothering a teacher with questions about something, and it's not considered a disruption because it's not defined.
I think it depends on when that's happening. And if it's, someone coming in to visit their child and then they start asking a bunch of questions in the middle of a lesson and they're like, hey, can we do that later? No, I agree with Ms. Counts that leaving the definition to the sites, I think that they've been able to decide up until this point what disruption means. And so I feel comfortable that our sites would be able to do that.
Oh.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I have another comment.
Okay.
I just, this is a district-wide policy, and it's a pretty important one. We're letting people from the public onto our campus, and they might not be parents. Mm-hmm. And so to leave it broad, I think is a mistake, and it's a security issue. And so I would like to move this item with the amendment that we explicitly state what a disruption is, as well as outlining the policy that visitors must sign in.
Okay, that's a motion. It died for lack of a second. Did you have any other comments about this policy? I know you said you had a couple comments. I just wanted to make sure that we covered.
Yeah, one more. I don't see anything on here in regards to having to fill out an application to be a volunteer. Is that something that should be within this policy? Because I know now in my daughter's class, to volunteer or to just visit and speak to the class, anyone who is interested in that has to fill out a form that kind of is like a job application almost. And so should that be explicit in this policy?
Mr. Enough?
We do have a separate policy,
okay.
I believe, IJOC, and a regulation that that covers school volunteers and has an application form specifically.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, board members have a motion for this item? I'll go ahead and move the item with the addition of requiring us, for guests to sign in at the front office. And Mr. Ernoff can put that language in, and Ms. Count seconds?
I'll second, yeah.
All right, I have a motion, a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, now we are, let's vote online. Now we are on 6.8, Governing Board Policy LCA, Administration of Student Surveys, second reading. Dr. Trujillo, Mr. Ernoff.
I'll just leap right in if that's
Go
okay.
for it, yeah.
Sure.
So this is another second read based on new legislation. This one is related to HB 2161, which among other things changes the requirements for administering student surveys. This is a law that didn't specify that we had to have a policy, but we already had a policy on administering student surveys. So in order to bring our policy up to date with current law, we made these changes. These were done also, these were done in consultation with our assessment and evaluation team to make sure that it followed sort of best practices for within the district. No, I think that covers it.
Okay. Board members, questions? Dr. Rafi.
Not a question, but just I just want to comment. I think we let these pass, and we kind of give a lot of these things and things that come out of the state, leeway when we know that's going to just harm our community. And I just think it's really unfortunate that we have such a large contingent of individuals in our community, in our state, that think that it's better to have our community be ignorant about what's going on in the lives of our students and their families and our communities here. All this does is makes it harder to really know, what is going on. Make decisions, whether it's be public health decisions, educational decisions, housing decisions, social service decisions, and all the things that we know are critical for our students and families to thrive. As someone, who's a physician with a master's in public health, I've used a lot of data when it comes to youth behavior and other things to make decisions on how we allocate resources and what we do effectively for our youth. And so this is really unfortunate we have to do this, and I just need to say that.
No, I agree. So I'll go ahead and move the item.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Item passes unanimously. Thank you. So we have addressed 7.1. Now we're on 7.2, consideration of performance impact analysis, DAPE middle school classrooms. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, President Grijalva, members of the governing board. On October 22nd, the team came before the governing board and presented a performance impact analysis with a proposal that would move the McGee DAPE middle school classroom prospectively over to Catalina High School. The board voiced its concerns and ultimately declined to authorize the administration to move the DAPE middle school classroom over to Catalina. Therefore, the team went back to the drawing board, and now we are here again with the proposal to take a look at Doolin. So our recommendation, in line with governing board feedback in August, is to open the DAPE middle school classroom at Doolin Middle School. Upon authorization from the governing board, we would begin making those arrangements. And then a second DAPE classroom middle school, a DAPE middle school classroom over at Doolin for the spring 23 semester, pending, of course, the enrollment needs of DAPE. The benefits of moving over to Doolin. Well, Doolin was a DAPE site. It always has been a DAPE site. The classroom assigned for DAPE programming was not in use throughout the pandemic. And then, of course, as DAPE enrollment dipped, both of the classrooms were not used as frequently as they were prior to the pandemic. Doolin is still in close proximity to the Central City corridor and all of the Midtown schools, and then even some of the East Side schools would make it a little bit more accessible. DAPE, the DAPE classroom over here at Doolin would feature its own entrance and exit separate from the main Doolin campus, ensuring that DAPE students have their privacy during their time in the program. The DAPE classroom has access to separate bathrooms for both students and faculty and access to water fountain. The classroom is technology available in terms of being able to connect the necessary devices and smart boards that would be needed for the program, and of course would be fully furnished. In terms of a timeline, we of course have been working on the DAPE proposal for quite some time. We're just sharing a timeline there going back to August and now here in September, October, where we are now looking for the location for the middle school classroom over at Doolin. The performance impact analysis for this particular proposal doesn't change from the performance impact analysis that we proposed in August. We haven't found any impact on any USP requirements or court orders for the movement from McGee over to Doolin. No impact to student assignment, as there are no boundary changes, magnet program changes, or changes to student achievement action plans. There are no impact to transportation, as students will continue to be issued SunTrans passes to access Doolin, and no impact to administrative or certificated staffing levels, and no impact to Section 5 of the Unitary Status Plan, which would be quality of education. The performance impact analysis also notes no impact on Unitary Status Plan requirements under discipline, as DAPE is an instructional and programmatic model designed to lessen the effects of exclusionary discipline on students. No impact on compliance with the USP requirement for family and community engagement, as both departments maintain separate budgets and do operate independently with separate staffs, separate leadership structures. No impact on USP requirements for extracurricular activities, and no impact on the district's programs and commitments in the areas of facilities and technology. More importantly, this proposed move moves the district administration more solidly in line to what we did hear from the court regarding concerns about placing middle school students in the proximity of high school students, or having middle school students share any kind of DAPE programming with high school students. This proposal will put DAPE middle school students onto a TUSD middle school in the appropriate setting.
Okay.
With that, we'll turn it over to questions.
Board members, questions? Ms. Shaw.
Thank you. First question, Dr. Trujillo, why are you giving the presentation and not the ladies listed here?
Well, we can certainly bring the team up. We figured since this was just a follow-up from the original presentation, we had already received direct board feedback about not considering Catalina. My thought was just to put the item in front of the board, but we can certainly have the team up if I can get the team here for direct questions from our governing board members.
Thank you. Hello, ladies.
Good evening.
Good evening. Jean, can you go to the slide 5, the timeline? Okay. Just, I just want to point out that I'm not sure if this is really a timeline because 4 of those things share the same date. And I think it's kind of just a glaring reminder that governing board control was once again usurped in the DAPE program. Ms. Nunez, could you give me an update on the staffing levels of DAPE?
Yes, we currently have 4 classrooms, 1 at Palo Verde, 1 at Doolin, 1 at Menlo, and 1 at Southwest. All 4 classrooms are staffed with teachers, and we just completed hiring the 3 additional behavior monitor positions that we needed. They're going through the HR process right now.
So each DAPE location has 1 teacher, is that correct?
Currently, yes. We are in the process of hiring more teachers. We have interviews set up for next week.
Okay, and you said there's 3 behavior intervention monitors?
Yes, we have 1 currently working, and we have 3 vacancies right now.
One working?
Yes, one's been there since last November.
At what site?
Right now we have her at Palo Verde.
Okay. And then how are the other sites faring right now?
So we're using the vacancies. We're using our what they call VCCs for our teachers, for our teacher vacancies. We're using long-term subs right now to make sure that every classroom has 2 adults.
Long-term subs. Mm-hmm. Okay. Didn't we just float some DAPE staff out to other areas? Like, wasn't that the last thing that we approved in regards to DAPE?
When there are no students in a DAPE classroom, then we do float them out. But that has not been the case since probably the first 2 weeks of school, maybe 3.
Okay. Any questions? If I can just continue, but I don't know if there's other questions. Okay.
I don't know. Board members, do any others have questions? Yeah, if you have a couple more questions, then feel free.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just wondering if also you can send the governing board a list of the current staff, teachers, and support staff at DAPE, their job descriptions, and the list of their certifications.
Sure.
Okay.
And would you like them at their locations as well?
That would be great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll go ahead and move the item. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Yes.
I'll
It's to move the classrooms. Did you second?
I second.
Yes, and Ms. Luna Rose seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, 7.3, school year 23-24 TUVA and Cole program merger and Arizona online instruction designation for TUVA performance impact analysis. Dr. Trujillo?
Yes, President Grijalva, members of the governing board. At our last governing board meeting, the board received a study session on the district's 2 premier virtual programs, TUVA and Cole, and the differences in opportunities provided to kids for the Tucson Unified Virtual Academy and the Catalina Online Learning Experience. And tonight, we're back and we're asking for governing board consideration of action to officially merge the 2 programs to designate the Tucson Unified Virtual Academy as the district's lone Arizona online instructional model to be approved by the Department of Education. And here to take us through tonight's recommendation is our Assistant Superintendent of Leadership and Student Success, Mr. Frank Armenta.
Good evening, President Grijalva, board members, Dr. Trujillo, board staff. Just again, welcome, and I'm glad that we're back here again. We were just here recently. I just do want to highlight that I do have a team here to support us in questions that you may have regarding combining these two programs. Tonight, we have Mr. Blaine Young here with us. We also have Michelle Sigafus, James Butler, Michael Beck, who's at Catalina, Yolanda Nunez, who is the director over Cole, and then also Karen Anton, who is here. She's also here as a Leadership Prep Academy candidate as well, so she's serving two roles. And then Melissa Molina, who's not here with us this evening, but she's here for support out there for us. And also we have CFO Ricky Hernandez to support us in this. So just really quickly, I want to, next slide please. Tonight's purpose, we're going to recap what we talked about or what I shared with you on 9/20. Also, I'll be giving you my recommendation. We'll have Finance give you some FTE update and kind of give you the financial forecast for that. Some assumptions as these schools will combine. And then also we have extensive work with the desegregation performance impact analysis. And then we'll have questions if you have for us, okay? At this point, next slide, it gives you what we talked a little bit about on 9/20 with respect to combining these two programs. We identified that TUVA is our real-time teacher-led instruction, synchronous, and then we've also identified that asynchronous self-paced instruction under Cole, which is our 612. Currently, Cole is our Arizona Online Instructional Program, K-12, but we also see that there are some things that they could benefit from TUVA. So I highlighted those for you on the benefits of combining those. And I do want to just kind of go through them. Again, I apologize for being redundant, but I think it's important for me to emphasize how we combine these two and what we'll get. With TUVA's strong family and student support and the SEL, we'll have that, the social emotional learning that we see in all of our schools. Cole will benefit from that. We also see the real-time technology support. What TUVA has presently is they do have an on-call technology support team that supports parents as well as students. It's somewhat difficult at times at Cole, but I give my hats off to the staff over at Cole who do a great job at getting the technology. We also are looking at the Tier 2 and Tier 3 student and support enrollment. The support staff. So we're looking at making sure that we have Tier 2 and Tier 3 support for them. We're also, again, because we're looking at maintaining Cole, that we're also going to bring credit recovery options to TUVA. And then also, we've noticed in this combination of these two areas that there's somewhat of an increase of middle school option for parents. So as we look at our district, we're looking at middle school reform. I think this is an opportunity for us to look at TUVA as that option. Also looking at making sure that we help out the administrative team. I do want to emphasize, and it doesn't mean to bring a negative light to this, but the two coordinators that serve for Cole presently do have full-time jobs. They work in technology, and also as Michael Beck, he continues to work at Catalina High School ongoing. And then we also have Ms. Nunez, who just spoke earlier, who has a full-time job. So this would give us an opportunity to utilize TUVA and their current structure that they have for that on those campuses. So again, I wanted to emphasize and recap what we talked about on 9/20. Next slide, please. I do think Dr. Ravi Shah did ask a question about the numbers, so I do want to bring up Ms. Sigafus, who presently oversees TUVA, to address that for you, sir.
Good evening, good evening, Governing Board President Grijalva, Governing Board members, Dr. Trujillo, and Council Aronoff. So yeah, last time you asked me to bring back some numbers on where our enrollment was. And as you can see, our kindergarten students are our lowest enrolled students. But then we go to the middle school, and our middle school, we start jumping up to 8th grade that has 140 students currently enrolled in it. So that is our highest enrollment, is within that 8th grade group, followed very closely by that 7th grade group. So we're seeing something that we're not necessarily seeing in other places, that middle school students really are flocking to TUVA. It seems to be a good, safe learning environment for them. But as you can see, as we go through our elementary, middle school, and high school, we are pretty evenly enrolled. If you look at the difference between high school, which has our highest enrollment, is at 365, and elementary is at 335. So it's only about a 30 student difference between each of the different grade levels.
And also, just to dig a little deeper on these numbers, I did provide some information to a board member requested where are these students coming from. So out of these students, we have identified 108 of those students are coming from outside of our district, with predominantly some of those students coming from Amphi in that area, which I thought was amazing that we're taking some of those neighboring students that are preferring to take online. So I did want to give you those numbers as well. Next slide, please. So here's what my recommendation is this evening to the governing board. I would like to combine TUVA and COLE as TUSD's #1 Arizona online instructional program, K-12. COLE will serve as an added functionality of TUVA, keeping COLE intact with its personnel, with its teachers, and where they physically sit. That we will make a name change from COLE to TUVA, and then this would be effective 2023-24 school year. So it gives us an opportunity, a nice runway for us to get to 23-24. It would also give us the opportunity for us to work on our budgets for the spring for the following year. Some of the questions that came up regarding state funding, so I don't know if Mr. Hernandez is here, if he is. All right. I'd like him to take us to these next two slides to give you some financial pictures and forecasts of what that looks like.
Welcome back.
Hi again. Third time in one night. I should buy a lottery ticket. All right, so state funding. You all are familiar with this formula. This is the same identical formula that we use for our brick and mortar schools. So right now, TUVA generates pre-adjusted base support of $5,249, or $5,249,745. So when you apply the formula that we use for bricks and mortar, their base support level is just over $5 million. Now, the basis for the calculation, I took a look at the ADM, the current enrollment that includes COLE and TUVA, and how many students we have as an average daily membership, not the actual enrollment. Right? The add-ons that we get for our English language learners and our SPED students, we have different categories of special education students and what that is. We receive 95% of funding for our full-time AOI kids and 85% of funding for our part-time AOI kids. So you take that number, the per pupil number, and basically you're multiplying it by those percentages depending on the student's enrollment. The one caveat is to understand this is not new revenue. These kids are already counted for in their current brick and mortar schools. So a Tucson High student who is attending at Tucson High but taking classes at TUVA is a Tucson High student and is being counted at Tucson High. So they are already part of our budget, of our overall student count. So this $5 million isn't new money. We're just essentially reallocating budget capacity between the brick and mortar campus and TUVA now as a standalone school, virtually, frankly. The teacher reallocation right now, we estimate that we will need to reallocate 36.2 FTE across the entire district. We do have a listing, a school-by-school listing, but you have a breakdown of what that looks like in elementary and K-8, middle schools and high schools. And this is where basically FTEs would be drawn from to then fund or put FTEs at TUVA. Next slide. So what are the financial implications? So we applied the staffing formula that we use for every campus to TUVA. Right now in FY23, TUVA has approximately 138 FTE, a staffing of $5.6 million and an operational budget of $26,000. When you apply the formula, their staffing FTE goes down to 64 FTE, if we want to round it, about a $3.1 million staffing level, about $34,000 in operations. So that is, the variance is obviously a cut or a reduction. This obviously doesn't include allocations that brick and mortar campuses receive. So there aren't allocations for custodians, for example, because they don't have a physical campus per se, or athletics because they don't have an athletics facility. So think of the fact that that 63.8 doesn't really include some of the FTEs that we would otherwise need at a physical campus. Now, the student counts in here does include COLE, so it does take into account COLE in here. In addition, this doesn't include any potential supplemental funding that the school would be eligible for. So if in the school year 24-25, they are eligible for Title I, we don't know what that number is because we've got to go through a whole year of student count before we know whether they're eligible for Title I funding. If they get tax credit dollars, they'd be eligible for tax credit dollars. So they'd be eligible for other funding to the extent that the formulas would allow, but those aren't accounted for here. Those are supplemental dollars. So that is kind of the financial impact at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. I appreciate that. As we move on, so to the assumptions, as we move forward to this, that TUVA would use Coles Arizona State school number ID. And I do want to assure the board that I, along with Mr. Hernandez and TUSD Legal Counsel, along with Blaine, we did have a conversation with ADE Finance, and they are aware of our request pending your approval. In addition to that, one of the comments that was made from ADE was unprecedented, that we are moving very slowly in a long runway to give them the opportunity to adjust. So they really appreciated the fact that we are being very diligent about our work and not rushing this process. So they are aware of that. Also, that TUMA would be the home school. So TUVA would be a home school for these students. That funding would allow the students, would follow the students from their home school to TUVA as identified in the financial implications. Also, that TUVA would take the Cole School Improvement label at this point. Currently, Cole is being watched by ADE in the area of the low graduation rate. Ms. Nunez, along with the team there, are working on this with an outside consultant, as I mentioned earlier. We are making some progress. We are working with the Cole staff, and then we would also work with the TUVA staff to fold that in as well. And then, as identified in the financial implications, that TUVA would be eligible, in this case, in 24-25 for Title I, so we would not be eligible next year for the Title I. And again, I want to move on to the PIA, and I do apologize for reading this, but it's something I think I need to read versus just kind of ad-libbing, so I do apologize if I'm reading this to you. So when we talk about the performance impact analysis that was conducted, there's no impact on the USP requirements on our court orders. There's minimal impact to student assignment as students will not attend their home school. However, no boundary changes, magnet program changes, or changes to school student achievement actions plans will be necessary. No impact to transportation as TUVA students learn from home, and Cole students will continue to learn from their home and learning environments. No impact to administrative or certificated staffing levels. Positive impact to Section 5 of the USP Quality of Education as Cole students will have access to TUVA resources. Continuing, no impact on USP requirements under discipline as Cole and TUVA instructional and programmatic model will not be modified. There is a positive impact on the compliance with USP requirements for family and community engagement. TUVA's Thriving Parent Committee will enhance Cole's family engagement. There is a minimal impact on USP requirements for extracurricular activities as students would attend their neighborhood school. Positive impact on the district's programs and commitments to the areas of facilities technology as TUVA would be centrally located and Cole would have the use of TUVA technology and supports. I do want to also highlight that there was some research base that we conducted, and I would like to bring up the individual who assists us with that. That would be Mr. James Butler, so this is a great time to bring him up. So Mr. Butler, would you please come forward?
Thank you, Mr. Armenta. President Grijalva, members of the governing board, Dr. Trujillo, and Council Aronoff. I'm very excited to be here today, and we want to frame this in such a way that we want to emphasize something that Mr. Armenta just briefly mentioned, and that is we want it to be diligent, and we also want it to be purposeful in what we do. So to that end, we have 5 areas, and we'll call them pillars for research, areas from the Elementary and Secondary Schools Act, which states, and I quote, digital learning is any instructional practice that effectively uses technology to strengthen a student's learning experience. So that one phrase frames what the power of combining COLE and TUVA amounts to. The TUVA staff reviewed the National Standards for Quality online programs using the rubric provided by the organization formerly known as INACOL, which is the gold standard for online instruction assessment. It is now called the Aurora Institute, but that's what that reference is. And from the work that the TUVA staff did, they scored 4 out of 5 in most areas, as we mentioned previously. We also attended, as a team, the Arizona Online Instruction Consortium, which is a statewide collection of school districts that have AOI programs, and we can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that no one based on those meetings, no one is doing what we're talking about in Tucson Unified School District with regard to when you combine TUVA with the functionality of COLE. No one in the state that we found is doing that currently. The National Educational Technology Plan, and this one specifically is from 2017, states, and I quote, "Today's students must be prepared to thrive in a constantly evolving technological world." So once again, that was one of the pillars of research which we utilized in guiding our work. And finally, the International Society of Technology in Education, or ISTE, and that is, if you're in ed tech in any way, shape, or form, ISTE is it on a stick. I mean, that's just basically, that organization is the guidepost, if you will. Quote, "Students use digital tools to broaden their perspectives and enrich their learning by collaborating with others and working effectively in teams locally and globally." So once again, utilizing these 5 pillars of research, we guided our work to inform how we would combine TUVA and COLE and what would that mean moving forward to provide a world-class education for the digital age and have our students future ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. And again, I do want to emphasize no one else is doing this. We are cutting edge. We're seizing that opportunity that we saw during ESSER in providing this. So the people who were the architects and designs of this in our district, again, had a forward thinking of where we were going. So I really wanted to emphasize the fact that there is research that supports and where we're headed and where you as a district board members are headed. And then conclusion, again, I want to emphasize my recommendation is that we combine TUVA and COLE as TUVA's AOI. COLE will serve as an added functionality of TUVA. We will take the name change from COLE to TUVA, and this will be effective 2023 school year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Board members, questions? Okay, Ms. Shaw.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome.
I think that TUVA and COLE are great resources for our students, and I think collaboration is very good, and I'm happy that this is happening. I just had a few questions about COLE. First, I'll start off with, you mentioned that COLE had low grad numbers. Is that because the enrollment is low?
No, we're presently searching that out. Also, we want to remind that COLE is a 365-day online instructional framework for them. So we're in the process of working and finding out what that happened. But I do want to assure you that there has been an uptick in their graduation rate. I think it's, I can't, off the top of my head, I think it's gone up from 34 to maybe 55. So they're headed in the right direction. But again, with Ms. Nunez's guidance and working with an outside vendor, that we are focusing on that, and also with John Lanz's team. So we are addressing that. But we also believe, I also believe that the instructional pieces that TUVA brings to that will support that, as well as the infrastructure of the counselors, the MTSS systems, that would also help with that grad rate.
Great. I asked that because a teacher reached out to me a couple weeks ago, and she does credit recovery at one of our high schools.
Yes.
And my first question in regards to that is, are the credit recovery sites at the high schools connected to COLE in any way?
Well, there are two types of students that have attended COLE or are attending COLE. There are concurrent enrolled students that are TUSD students. So those students, for example, would go at Tucson High and probably need econ or a fine, health class. They might take that. But then you also have the traditional COLE student that enrolls at COLE. I think also, if you remember, Mr. Lanza was up here talking a little bit about ESSER and how we're going to look at the use of response to intervention to do credit recovery. So part of my work has also been doing the expansion of credit recovery. So we want to make sure that we maximize those opportunities at the school site. So we are in that process of bringing them together. Also, with the demand of COLE at the beginning of the year, we also have solicited some help from TUVA. So we're using the same Apex platform in all three of those areas.
Okay. And she had mentioned that, it's working for some students, but some students are so far behind that they don't have capacity to help them gain the credits for 2 years or more. And so she was wondering if we could, Sunnyside has the Star Academy, yes, which is once you get to a certain amount where you don't have those credits, you have to go to Star Academy to build those credits. And so she was wondering if we can impel some students to go to COLE to gain the credits where they're, gonna get the credits and then can come back to their home school.
Thank you for the question. Again, I will emphasize that COLE meets that. I've been there several times, and I will tell you that the instructors that are the teachers are they do have open labs for those students to be there. I also want to emphasize that using the MTSS system from TUVA would support that to do the identify them as early indicators through our dashboard that the MTSS department has put together. So this is another reason combining these schools would allow us that opportunity to use all of those tools to ensure that we are guiding those students in the right direction.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll go ahead and move the item.
I will second.
A motion, a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for all of you and all your work.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
President Grijalva,
Yes,
suggest
Dr.
that
Robbie.
I don't know, I haven't done no motion yet, but maybe you have a Mr. Butler come and give a presentation at 8:30 every evening just to get the energy in the room.
That'd be great. Yep.
Thank you.
So fun. Okay. Item 7.4 is Governing Board Policy AC, non-discrimination, first reading. Dr. Trujillo?
Yes, President Grijalva, members of the Governing Board. Before I do turn it over to Michael Aronoff, I want to commend Board Member Shaw for her point about credit deficient students. As we leave that last item, we're going to be working as an administration to be more assertive in telling these students that these are the programs they need to be in. I think sometimes as administrators and educators, we get into the lull of doing what the students want us to do instead of what they need. They do need the adults telling them, look, mijo, you have 2 credits and you're 17 years old. You need credit recovery afternoon here at Choya. We're going to enroll you. We're going to set a meeting with your parent, or you need to look at COLE. Here's a schedule. We haven't turned that corner, and we really do need to, because 9 times out of 10, a parent's going to join you. If they know that the program is there, they know the opportunity is there. So we'll certainly, along with tonight's approval, be working to pivot our administration in that direction. So with that,
and Dr. Trujillo, just to piggyback on that, I think that also applies to summer school and other programs that are, if you want, this is here. And I think that we really have to move towards, you need to do this, and I'm going to call your parents and tell you have to, because we're making a big investment as a district in providing a lot of supports, and a lot of those supports are underutilized. And it's an expense for us when you have credit recovery classrooms that are really under enrolled comparison to when you compare it to the number of students that need the service. Okay, now we're on 7.4, sorry.
yes, I'm going to turn it over to a first read of Governing Board Policy AC. We'll turn it over to Mr. Aronoff.
Thank you again. So this is, as Dr. Trujillo said, a proposed revision up for first read to Policy AC. This is the district's anti-discrimination policy. The revision would add a paragraph that is meant to clarify this policy and fill in, I don't want to call it a gap, but the concern that comes up when we have curricular materials that use certain language that we as modern people would not use because it's discriminatory and hurtful. And so we're proposing adding this language in an effort to address that issue. I will point out the way that this is phrased calls out specifically the N-word as the sort of most notable example of a word that has come up in curriculum, but we feel doesn't have any place in the mouths of our employees in particular in discussion. It's not to say that that is the only word, it is just an example, and we didn't want to make a list of all the possible words. We thought it better to sort of give define the parameters and give the example. This was distributed to the partnership group, to the employee groups. It was distributed about 3 weeks ago. We haven't gotten any remarks back from that. And if approved today, it would just be approved for posting for public comment for 30 days.
Okay. I would love to see a policy similar to this for call to the audience, because it's becoming incredibly offensive to have to sit up here, and because we have, this whole idea that it's the community gets to say kind of whatever they want to say, and if our employees have to abide by these rules in our buildings, I think everybody should. So just, put that on your to-do list. That'd be great. Okay. Board members, any questions about this particular policy? Ms. Luna Rose, then Ms. Shaw.
Okay, not necessarily a question, but more of why it took so long to have this in this policy. I mean, I'm glad that legal's making that distinction, but we're in 2022, and I think this should have been put on a long time ago. So the only other thing, maybe just to point out, because I spend my time doing a lot of editing in my other life. I know you've pointed out the N-word. Can we put in some wording, because some people might take that literally, that says an N-word or and words like that or something along those lines, because somebody could say the W word or you know what I mean? Like, can we make it where it's N-word and words like that unacceptable? I don't know. Such as, yeah.
So it's currently phrased as.
I know, such as the N-word, but I think sometimes some people will still take that too literally. I'm just trying to make sure that it's. Yes.
We could, the classic legalese way to write it, which I don't love personally, but is the including but not limited to.
Oh yeah, that one's not good.
we could write that also, but I sort of prefer such as more sort of in the language. But I'm happy to make changes if the board wants to make changes.
I hear Ms. Luna Rose's concern that we're just speaking about this one word, and I think people will say that as opposed to, then that means it's okay to say derogatory terms about Mexican Americans or about, and they'll just throw the other ones because it's not listed specifically.
And
I know, and you didn't want to make that list.
And you don't want to make the list.
Right.
Right.
And my concern there is once we make a list, that's really where we invite it's not on the list. But if we give the parameter and the sort of broader definition, then we can really say, look, you understand what this is about.
Okay. Dr. Trujillo, I'm sorry, Ms. Shaw, Dr. Ravi, and then Dr. Trujillo had his hand up. So did you want to add something to this particular point, Dr. Trujillo?
Yeah, Michael and I had this conversation getting ready for the meeting that there are words that are equally traumatizing and for our LGBTQ community members, our Jewish community members, and we've got to find a way to, I think, capture, maybe there's a category of language that is separate and apart that I don't know how we would get at that without making a specific list. My fear also is that when you just mention this particular slur, it might leave the door open for others. Well, that wasn't in the policy, so you can't write me up or you can't do this. So I don't quite know how to get at that without making that list.
Does some of that have to do with professional development and training, like in regulations as opposed to policy?
The answer, I think the answer to that is yes.
Okay.
And I did actually just note also, and I might suggest this for the board's consideration right now before posting, is that the way we wrote this, I'm realizing as I look at it, and in response to Dr. Trujillo's point, which is a great one, is that it says racial epithets spoken or read aloud, and really that should be broader than racial epithets. And I don't know if epithets alone is the right word, or if it's identity-based epithets. We might think about what do we call that category.
Since this is the first read, can you maybe get some feedback from board members and bring it back?
Sure.
At our next meeting? Okay. Well, and there might be other comments too. Ms. Shaw and then Dr. Ravi.
Thank you. Well, I think the reason why they explicitly state the N-word is because it's the slur most used on our campuses. And it's really disappointing to see that it continues and continues. And in many cases, so I've heard from staff, there's nothing that's done when students use this word. And so I would really like to invite the public to weigh in on this policy. And I think that we should be more strict when the word is used by anyone, staff or students of any race. I was at a staff meeting for African American Student Services recently, and I asked them about the use of this word around campuses, and everyone in the room said it's used at an insane rate, and there's nothing that they have been able to do to staunch its use. And they asked for a policy that made it easier for them to, I don't know, do something about it. And I know a little bit further on in this policy, it kind of refers us to the code of conduct. But I wonder how many students who use the word are actually like disciplined for using it. Are they just like given a slap on the wrist and gone through a DEI training, because that's not going to cut it. And for this specific one, in regards to the use of the word by staff, I think that we should be explicit and make sure that they know that if it appears in a book, that they need to use the abbreviated term. It's not really clear in this policy as it is that staff shouldn't say the full word and that they should instead use the abbreviated N-word. And so I would like to see that in this policy, but I am, of course this is a first read. And so yeah, I would invite the community and staff and students to weigh in on this and, tell us about their experience at the schools and its use, and maybe ideas of what we can do to limit its use.
Dr. Ravi, thank you.
Thank you, President Grijalva. My comment was about what's kind of discussed already in terms of updating the racial slurs to include other communities and groups. And so I think use of racial slurs and other identity-based epithets would probably be sufficient.
So do we want to send some suggestions to Mr. Aronoff and then have it come back at a meeting, or do we want to put it out and get some input from the public and then kind of send our suggestions at the same time? Feel free to move it.
So I'll make a motion to adopt this as a first read and to put it out to the public for comments.
Okay, I'll second. So a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Item passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, now we are on 8.1, TUSD Communicable Disease Outbreak Task Force Update. Dr. Trujillo.
President Grijalva, members of the governing board, I'd like to welcome to the podium here our Director for Health Services, Mr. Joseph Ga. We also have our Employee Relations Director, Maricela Mesa. They've been chairing the Communicable Disease Task Force, and They've done a wonderful job, and they're here to give you an update in advance of their final recommendations, which you'll see at the next meeting, October 25th. Mr. Gaw?
Thank you very much. Madam President, Board, Superintendent, we are here to give you a brief update on what you get to see next round. So back on the 26th of April, you had asked to have a task force that was focused on employees and public so that they have a voice in our process of policy and procedures, and also how we shall implement testing and masking guidelines and how we communicate those things out. So in the month of August, that was turned over to the health services team, and we began that process. Since then, we now have 34 participants on this team, and they range from everything from leadership to parents, to teachers, to principals. And the really cool part is that it is a very diverse team with a ton of background, and they're highly engaged. We also have 2 members of the good old Pima County Health Department also engaged in that too, so they are also helping out. And we are currently recruiting everybody and anybody that is actually wanting to participate in that process. So since we have started this journey, we had our first meeting on the 19th of August, of which we have now completed 8 multiple meetings, and we have 7 still scheduled between here and the next year, or through May. We have covered everything from COVID-19, monkeypox, vaccinations, and we have now begun processes to basically create a uniform process by which we can guide for all cases coming up. So we have also completed a full charter of the team. We have the rules of engagement as well involved with that, and we have also some formally we have turned in the COVID new regulation practices as well, and we are working on the first response process for monkeypox, which the county has actually stated is a model for other school districts. So they're very excited about that, and given that we still have no cases at all here in our district, we are well ahead of the game for if that actual, should we have our first case. We did have a few challenges in this process. We had not started out with as much participation as hoped, so we had changed our approach to basically go after internal and the external partners to see who was not approached before, would you possibly end up engaging now? And that has actually turned out extremely well. So at this point, we have a big task force. But at the beginning, it began like extremely small. We have also found that the meeting times, it was very challenging per group because not everybody's on the exact same scheduling process. So we put out a couple of surveys, and gave us a whole range of stuff as well. But we are now settled into Wednesday afternoons, one time per month. So moving forward, what this task force is currently doing is we continue to promote joining our team. We have begun to schedule COVID-19 vaccine clinics, so that process is happening. We have also begun a process to actively review the current health policies in play at this point, and we're going to make a formal written future recommendations to you in the next meeting, but we are also planning to do a after action review of what we did during COVID as well. With that being said, that concludes our report, and I am now available for questions.
Thank you. Questions, board members? Okay, Michelle?
Thank you. Sir, do the employees who participate in this task force get added duty stipend?
They do not. Right now, it is entirely voluntary, and we do not compensate beyond that process at this point.
Okay, I wonder if we can explore that.
Sure.
That's
all. Right. Any other questions? Dr. Robbie?
Another question, but I always want to thank you for coming here. It's a pleasure to meet you in person for the first time. I get your emails every day about the COVID update, so it's great to put a face behind all the emails and all the communication about keeping our campuses safe and healthy. And I'm so glad we have an RN. I've worked with so many RNs over my career, and so glad to have a nurse really leading the process, both internally here at TUSD as well as on this task force. So great job putting together an amazing team. I saw the list when I asked you that the other day. I think today I got that list of participants, and we have a really good diverse group of individuals from different parts of our school and wider community involved in this task force. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys come in terms of suggestions for us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And then we have a formal presentation on the 25th.
Yes.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Future meeting dates and agenda items. Dr. Trujillo? Yeah, I know. I just wanted to finish this one.
President Grijalva, members of the governing board, we have a very, very exciting October 25th. We will be unveiling our initial Phase 1 Safety and Security Infrastructure Capital Investment Proposal for your consideration that night. We will be having a long-awaited study session on the district's current dress code and associated regulations for student dress across the district. We'll have a final report and recommendations from the TUSD Communicable Disease Outbreak Task Force. We're going to have our annual 40th day report on the state of enrollment in the district after its first 40 days, and a very exciting presentation on our CTE Facilities Improvement Initiative, the reinvestment of over $1 million into CTE facilities across the district for expanded programming. We'll be very busy at the end of the month.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Trujillo. And then if anyone wants to add any items, you can say so now, or you can send them to Dr. Trujillo. We still have 2 items, 6.2 and 6.3. But first, we need to go back into executive session for a little bit to get some information we couldn't get earlier. So we are going to go to executive session, then come back and vote on 6.2 and 6.3. So our meeting will be adjourned until we come back. Thank you for waiting. Oh, okay. So we're going to go ahead and come back in session. We are dealing with item 6.2, which is consideration of revision of the school year 2021 superintendent goals. Dr. Trujillo, did you want to touch on this?
President Grijalva, members of the governing board, I do want to thank you for your flexibility on this goal. I think when we sat down in 2020 at the beginning of the outbreak, we certainly were in a different place as a community with regard to viewing this as a health emergency. Mm-hmm. I think now going back and seeing how a lot of this health emergency has been politicized, I want to thank the governing board for understanding that aspect of goal number 6.
And so we're just eliminating that goal, correct? 6? A, B, that one? That's correct. So it's 6A through G? Is that right? There's 6A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay, so I'll go ahead and move the elimination of 6 for the superintendent goals.
I'll second.
Oh,
And Dr. Ravi seconds. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes unanimously. And now we're going to move on to item 6.3, the evaluation of the superintendent and award of performance pay for the 2021 school year. Dr. Trujillo, or legal, or do we just want to vote? And I'm fine with either one of them. I think what we did is these were the goals that were outlined in the superintendent's evaluation, and then they're weighted, and the previous boards have approved the weight. And so with the elimination of 6, and considering the way the score is laid out, and this is an evaluation that was completed by board members, the overall is 2.9, and then the total performance would be $10,725 out of $15,000. And because in his contract, in Dr. Trujillo's contract, there is a pay for performance of $15,000 that has been for the last 3 years. Okay. All right. So I'll go ahead and move the item.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes unanimously. Thank you so much. And this meeting is adjourned. Yay.